And we are back to being live. Hopefully, people start finding us and joining to watch again. I apologize again for having to switch feeds so much during the day, but unfortunately, not every single program allows you to live stream for more than 4 hours of time. For those of you guys watching on Twitter, Twitter's the reason. Twitter only lets you live stream for 4 hours of time, so I've got to keep switching up these feeds so that way it doesn't cut off and you can watch on Twitter. And we're going to have some fantastic guests joining me right now. I'm going to introduce them here in a second. But remember, we are raising money for Mental Health America. It's a fantastic organization. And for every dollar you donate, you get a raffle ticket for all the amazing gifts and prizes that have been donated by people who are part of today's and tomorrow's live streams. Joining us now is the aforementioned Jordan Eisen. He's here. He's the youngest participant in TGFBI history. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Hey, Justin. How's it going?
So, Jordan, tell everybody how old you are.
So I'm 16. I'll do a little story about how I got into this. I mean, I've always loved sports. I'm in St. Louis, so it's kind of just like a default that you're a Cardinals fan. So always have been into baseball. And a couple years ago, I was like, I really like this. So why don't I just like start a blog and a podcast? There's nothing stopping me. So I just did it. And a lot of guys in the industry are very nice, very willing to talk to you, which has been a big surprise, but I'm very thankful for that. And I've gotten to meet some really nice people at a very young age too.
Well, let everybody know where you can reach on social media and then plug your work, because I've been on your podcast. It's fantastic. So I want people to find it.
Yeah. So I actually just dropped a podcast, an episode with Jason Collette. I only do weekly podcasts because, I have school and other things. So this past one was catcher, first base, second base preview. I'm not like sleeper in the bust where I get to do 17 outfield previews, but it's a little rushed. But yeah, you can find me at Field Division Sports, anywhere you get your podcasts, or at FOV_sports, as you see in my name, on social media, Twitter. I also have an Instagram that I try to post to pretty often. And yeah, you can find me anywhere.
All right. Also joining us is George Montanez. George, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up, Justin? How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I'm surviving. I don't even know how many hours in it now. I've been going. I think 6 or 7, something like that. It feels okay though. I'm not yet tired. We'll see how I'm feeling by the end of tomorrow. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media, and then plug everything that you do, because you are becoming a star in the industry.
I appreciate that. So you can find me on Twitter at Roto_Nino, and I've just been hired by NBC Sports Edge, formerly Roto World. So really excited about that, and I'm still working over at Fantrax HQ as well. And I just want to say, nice to meet you, Jordan. That's so cool that you're like already jumping right into this, and you're so young. So really cool to see.
Right. Yeah, I think it's so awesome. Dude.
I wish I was into something like that when I was 16. That's really cool.
He got a jump on all of us. I was like 30 when I started this. So like he's got 14 years on my start. So I fully expect him to be running some major fantasy corporation by the time he gets to my age.
I gotta get my kids off of Fortnite and start getting them into baseball.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna tell my 10-year-old and my 2-year-old they're slacking.
Yeah,
like they need to get working here for sure. Joining us as well is Dave Swan. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey Justin, how's it going right now?
It's going well, man. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and then plug what you do.
At Davithius, DAVITHIUS, and then I write over at Rotoballer, Fantrax HQ, and Pitcher List.
All right, and joining us as well is Brian Feldman, who is different than I think almost every guest we're having on, because he does some really cool stuff, and he's giving away one of the coolest prizes that is going to be given away this weekend. We're going to do that here later in this segment. So if you haven't please donate now so that way you're eligible to win what Brian's going to be giving away. But Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Remind everybody where you could be reached on social media and talk about what you do.
Sure. My website is fantasybaseballauctioneer.com, and the Twitter is @fanbbauctioneer. I am the professional auctioneer for some of the experts leagues for Tout Wars, occasionally Labor and NFBC, and of course by professional that means unpaid. But it's a gig that I sort of fell into and really enjoyed it quite a bit, and I have a great time on my website, thefantasybaseballauctioneer.com. I keep it very lighthearted, try to stuff as many jokes in there as possible. I was hoping maybe I could figure out a way to, do something with this. I started the website 2 years ago, and then 12 days later, COVID shut everything down. So it's now $200 I paid to GoDaddy for virtually nothing.
Well, what you do is super cool, because I've had the pleasure of being in an auction that you auctioneered for Tout Wars NL, and like that is an art. Like to be able to command a room, keep everything organized, and really let the flow go. So, I mean, how do you was there a school for this? Like, how did you find out you were good at this?
Well, I do have some theater in my background, as a performer on stage, and I've also been in sales for many decades. So I'm used to being in front of a group. Don't have a problem with stage fright or anything like that. So it's just a matter of being loose and sometimes stuff comes out of my mouth before it has been thoroughly processed, but that's okay. That happens sometimes. It's just a matter of being comfortable, I think, in front of groups and not being intimidated.
I mean, like I said, you do a phenomenal job at those auctions. I mean, it's super impressive. There's no way I could do it. Like, it takes enough for me to direct a room during a podcast, much less 12 or 15 participants shouting out numbers at me while I'm trying to remember who was just put up for bid and all that. It is really an art.
Thank you.
So we might have someone joining us at some point as well, but we're gonna move on because I don't want any dead air. And so let's talk about our topic for this one. And that is, we just did hitting busts in the last segment. We're going to do some pitching busts. And so I'll start with you, Brian. Who is your first pitcher you're fading this year or think could bust?
Sure. So I took the three guys that I picked. They're not based on any advanced metrics from me, right? I'm not looking. You're not going to hear me talk about spin rate or swinging strike percentage or xFIP or anything like that. I'm using kind of my gut, which is rather formidable if you saw me stand up here. I kind of take this coming from the viewpoint of being, just an enthusiastic player, especially for people that play in home leagues. That's kind of the attitude I take. So I'm not going to go nuts. I'm just going to go here on, sort of my gut instinct. It's not going to be hard to figure out the strategy I've taken with these picks. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, it's obvious, or you took the easy way out or whatever. It's like, well, I've lived 60 years this way and I'm not going to stop now. So get off my lawn. So my first guy is Chris Sale. Current ADP base is around 268, which is somewhere around the 22nd round in a 12-team league. And I'm sure a lot of owners would jump at that and say, boy, that's a great bargain. And I'm not going to disagree that he could conceivably be that bargain, but I think we really need to look at the issue of workload. Now, let's assume that he comes back relatively healthy and on time. Maybe he then gets 15 or 20 starts. But, the average start nowadays is 5 innings, 5 1/3. He's 32 years old. They are paying him a boatload of money. They're not probably going to be competitive. They are not going to do anything to harm this guy. I would be surprised to see him get anything more than 100 innings, if that. I think you're looking at like 75 to 100 innings. So for that same number of innings, I think I'd rather, in that ADP area, I'd be looking more at a steady Eddie kind of guy like Zach Davies or Ryan Yarbrough, or possibly a potential closer are right in that ballpark. Greg Holland and Gallegos and Mark Melancon and Jose Leclerc, or some really young arms if you want to take a chance. Right in that neighborhood is Tony Gonsolin and Nate Pearson and Brady Singer. So I'm gonna fade off of Sale. I don't see the value in taking the chance on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you on Sale. He's one of those guys where, like, I understand if he was healthy, we'd be talking about him as potentially top 20, top 15 starter coming into the year. But, like, we know he's not going to be ready till the start of summer. He's already had one setback with a stiff neck. There's just so many warning flags. And like I said, the Red Sox aren't playing for anything this year. They're reloading for future seasons. So, like, why would they push him? Like, so you're talking about a guy that even when he does come back, let's say he comes back healthy. Is he actually going to qualify for a win most games?
Right.
I don't know. They're probably going to pull him and save that workload, for next year and for that monstrosity of a contract that they've got still on him. So I completely agree with you on Chris Sale. Dave, who's your first guy you're fading?
So we're gonna come out hot. A guy I'm just absolutely fading, and it's like maybe a risk thing or something, but it's Trevor Bauer. Like when you think about, like, you have these friends who like get married and you just know there's going to be like absolute problems. Like that's what went off in my head when I thought like Dodgeritis mixing with Bauer who wants to pitch every 4 days. Like it couldn't be any more of a yin and a yang to me. And just when I sit there in a draft room and see him going in like the first round with all this crap that surrounds him, and like the NL Central was so weak last year, and then he has all these metrics that just aren't playing well. That gigantic left on base, a very low BABIP. There's just so many things that are going to scream regression. And even in just a normal year, we kind of look at Trevor Bauer as not a guy who should be in this early of a pick. I understand kind of that he's still going to have probably a productive season, but my God, to put him that high, I'm going to be fading him quite a bit. And I know I'm never going to end up with him in a draft.
Yeah, and this is a guy we've talked about already once today as a guy coming off of a big year that we might want to fade, and I'm right there with you. I've made the comp a bunch. I've already made it today that he is the BJ Upton of pitchers, a guy who figures something out, is doing really well, and then all of a sudden, for no apparent reason whatsoever, except for he gets in his own head, he changes something and then sucks. And we've seen this, have almost Alex Rios-esque seasons in which he's great one year, awful the next, great one year, awful the next. And we've seen it in season where has a great month and then an great 2 months, awful months. And it's a small sample last year of the great 2 months. I'm not paying that first round price tag either. Nope. So I'm right there with you. George, give me your first guy.
So my first guy, going right around pick 28, is Max Scherzer. And I think with Scherzer, for me, it's just a little more of, 1 year early versus 1 year too late, right? He's going into his age 37 season. Has had a couple of nagging injuries kind of come up in the last couple of years. Had a hamstring last year, dealt with that neck the year before. And I mean, the underlying numbers, they still look good, right? I mean, he still has the velocity, he still has a swing strike rate. But I think there is a slight trend, over the last few seasons of him starting to get hit a little harder. And so for me, I think I would just, I think I'd rather take the younger guys on the upswing, around that same range, and like Woodruff, Gallen, Jack Flaherty, and I'll be out even if it's a year too early. But I am fading Max Scherzer.
I don't know that I'm with you on that one, but I can understand. And there's so many pitchers in that elite tier that you can just pivot to. And I don't have a problem with it necessarily. I know my partner in the tag team draft that we had last week, she did not want to touch Max Scherzer, so we went with Flaherty and Gallen on that 2-3 turn instead. But I'm also he's just one of those guys that he just seems to keep going, right? He's like the Energizer Bunny, and yeah, I guess there is something to be said for jumping off a year early rather than a year late. But I'm not super afraid about Max Scherzer.
Yeah, there's no real there's no real underlying evidence to say he's just terrible now.
Yeah, and I mean he's in the last year of that huge contract, right? So it's like the Nationals, they have no reason not to push him, right? And just let other guys are going to have inning limits and maybe limited in starts and stuff. I don't think Scherzer will be. I think he at worst is going to be a huge volume play. All right, Jordan, you give me your first bust.
Yeah, so to me, there is really just one very large elephant in the room, and it's got to be Walker Buehler. Like everything we've said about workload being important, definitely without a doubt applies to Walker Buehler. The Dodger thing, like you talked about with Bauer, that's concerning too. They seem to be extra hesitant with him since he's just such a prized possession. Like, I'm not saying he's good, not good. I just have doubts that he's going to get a workload that really helps you. Sure, he could hit like a 3.25 ERA, but if he gets that in like 100 innings or 120 innings, it's not that helpful. And if he was going late enough, I would definitely be on board. But they're just guys around him that either don't have as much of a question mark to me or are just not too many are better. But like Flaherty, I'd rather have him, Castillo, Nola, etc. Like I'm very concerned about his workload because the Dodgers just always seem to favor putting him in for 5 innings, sometimes 4. He's not going to get very many 7-inning starts, and that's what you want when you take a pitcher in round 2.
All right. I mean, I think that's a bold call right there, but I think you bring up a lot of good points. Dodgeritis, he struggled with having troubles ramping up last year. He's still young. We haven't seen the huge workload yet quite from him. I do like the skills though, man. And that's why I keep buying back in every once in a while. But I can't argue with anything you've said. So good call out there, Jordan. Joining us is, okay, I'm going to try not to butcher your name, all right? Kev Ma Surgeon. Did I do that right?
That's literally as good as you can do it. I'm not going to blame you for anything else. So thumbs up on that.
Hey,
I tell people my surgeon because it's just so much easier than going for Moss or Edjan. Too many syllables. You're fine.
All right, there we go. At RotoSurgeon on the Twitter machine. Let everybody know. Well, I just said where you can reach on Twitter, but let everybody know what you do in the industry.
So I started off with Rotoballer. I'm still with them. Rotoballer, fantastic company. I've been writing with them for about, I'd say 3 years now, 3 years in April or so. And then I'm also working for The Game Day, which is a newer multimedia company that's doing betting and fantasy sports. So those are my 2 main culprits that I go to at all times first. So you can go to them for my writing, and you go to the Operating Room on Apple Podcasts for my personal podcast that I feature guests all around the year for baseball, basketball, and football. So yeah.
Definitely check out his podcast. Check him out on Twitter too. He's a good Twitter follower. I started following you recently, and I've really enjoyed every time you jump into a discussion. I think you bring the heat and bring good points. So definitely go follow him on Twitter. Go catch out his podcast and go read his work. So we're talking about bust. You caught us right in the back end of that first round. So go ahead and give us your first pitcher bust.
Yeah, thanks. So my first pitcher bust, and I wouldn't say this is a bust. It's just an ADP kind of it's an ADP bust more than anything. I think that's Zach Gallen, starting pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks. I have an issue with Gallen, not because of his stuff. I think he's a fantastic pitcher. I think his command is incredible. He has 4 really good pitches, but none are elite. He has no real out pitch that's, he has a good fastball. He has a good change. He has a good everything, just not really good to the point where I'm confident starting him against the Dodgers, the Padres, a Giants team which versus right-handed pitching was top 10 last year and added Tommy La Stella at the top of the order. And then he has to go to Coors 3 times this year? We don't really know. He went to Coors 1 time last season, which isn't a big enough sample size to say, oh, he's not going to get crushed at Coors because he didn't get crushed in Coors last year. Well, we know how Coors works. There's so much variance with the situation every time you go in. Literally, you could be a 0.2 inning outing with 7 earned runs just off bad luck. So with Gallen, yeah, sure, he can be a fantastic pitcher, have his confidence. His xFIP is pretty good. Sierra's pretty good, but they lane between 3.5 and 4 rather than that sub 3.5 you want to see for an elite type pitcher. So I'm not really sure he's good enough to be confident against elite level teams. He did face the Dodgers and succeed last year, but one of those starts was against their B team. I believe Justin Turner wasn't in that game. Cody Bellinger was not Cody Bellinger last year. And then they had Gavin Lux, who really wasn't ready. And this season is going to be a lot harder in the NL West. I just think it's such a tough matchup with everything. Even I know you're a Giants fan, Justin Mason. So I know that you guys, I believe, lowered the outfield wall, and now it's a little more of a hitter's park than it used to be. So it's not as favorable for starting pitching in that division as before. So Zach Gallen, someone I'm just not drafting in the top 50, even top 60, probably.
So they did lower that fence, but what really actually helped the hitters in the ballpark was the fact that they closed that gate where people can watch, and it cuts off a jet stream that runs through the park, or when it's open. And so with it being closed, the jet stream was in full effect. Definitely helped out the left-handed power there. I think that's going to be closed this year because they are going to start letting fans back in. So it's not going to play as well for pitchers as maybe it has, in the history of that park. But I think it's going to play better than it did last year. So maybe somewhere in the middle would be my guess, and we definitely want to kind of keep paying attention to the news on whether or not they're going to have that open or close, because I know at one point last season, it was like the 7th best hitters park. And that is not what you think of when you think of San Francisco, especially with that offense there. It's not like it's got a very good offense to support those kind of numbers. So clearly that jet stream had an impact. And also, yes, lowering the fence definitely did help a little bit, but I think it's more about that jet stream than it is the fence itself. All right. Why don't you go ahead and just give us your second one right there, Kev?
Okay. Man, there are so many pitchers that I kind of play Mineswiper when I play with starting pitching, because I like to allow these busts to go and go and go. But someone I just can't draft at all is Steven Strasburg. That's obviously because of his carpal tunnel issue, which it's such a rare situation not to have carpal tunnel. We've seen pitchers have carpal tunnel and succeed in the past. We've seen like David Price, and there's a long history of pitchers who've dealt with it. But the last pitcher, and I think the only pitcher who's had the surgery he's had, is Jared Eichhoff. And as we know, Jared Eichhoff's not really in the league right now. I think he might be on a minor league contract somewhere, but he's not a starting pitcher in the MLB. He was more of a fringe level SP4, SP5, but we've never seen a pitcher at Steven Strasburg's level get the surgery and then also have to return. So I like, for a top 100 pick, why would I spend it on someone with so much uncertainty, with so many games missed throughout his career? And I get it. He has the pedigree. He's an incredible SP. I loved him last year. I loved him the year before because I liked the discount you were getting off the past injuries. But now off a major surgery, I really don't care what the news is. I'm not drafting Steven Strasburg.
Hey, I'm actually right there with you on this one. I don't know if I buy the Gallen one completely, but Steven Strasburg, not touching it. And I know, as he starts to pitch, right now, and people are seeing bullpens, and once we see him on a mound for spring training games, his price tag's going to go up, and I'm not going to come anywhere close to that. There just isn't a huge track record for this surgery with pitchers, like you said. And it's not like this is his only injury issue. He's been a guy who's had trouble staying on the mound often throughout his career. So you just double those two things up, and if someone else gets the goodness, I'm happy for him. But he's burned me enough times already prior to this that I'm just I'm not going to do it this year. No. Dave, give me your next guy.
All right, so next one's similar. It's I think he might still be able to be slightly productive in the season. It's a lot of driven to ADP as far as a bust, and I just don't think he's going to perform. And that's Zach Wheeler. So he had a really weird 2020 that comes off here. So you pull up Savant, you look at his fastball. It was his four seam, just thrown in the zone all day, nonstop. but the ground ball rate just absolutely skyrocketed on this thing. So I start looking at this as being like, just something that was extremely lucky. His home run to fly ball rate way down as far as his career goes. And, we've seen him before. He's a bit more of a fly ball pitcher, and I don't understand what happened in his last 2 months. I think there was quite a span of luck, and maybe it's pushing him up the draft boards, and they see that maybe 2020 season and assume they're going to get something like it. But, this is a guy I think is going to be pushing it in the high threes ERA. I know he can get you some strikeouts, but and he's kind of always been a guy that people like because he'll go those extra innings, but it doesn't sound like that's going to be an absolute thing for him. So I just don't understand it at the 93 ADP. I think he should be way down there. I would put him like in the 120s, if not further down. I'd be taking like McCullers or Gossman over him every day before Zach Wheeler.
Yeah, I don't really know what to make of Zach Wheeler, to be quite honest, because like it's like on top of like a long history of injury track record, you've also got a guy that completely like changed parts of his profile in 2020. So it's like, was that just short sample stuff where he was trying to like save himself a little bit and not hurt himself? Like we thought he might opt out like at one point. Like it was a weird season. And I have not drafted very many shares of Zach Wheeler, and probably need to drop him in my ranks a little bit to kind of reflect that, because I don't know what to make of Zach Wheeler in 2021.
Yeah,
Brian,
not like his. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
All right, Brian, go ahead and give me your next one.
All right. So my second guy is Noah Syndergaard. Coming in at right now, ADP is 332, which is around the 27th round in a 12-team league. I would consider him at best for this year sort of an SP5. And in that same level, there are some other guys being drafted around that spot that I like better. Josh Lindblom, Brad Keller, Kikuchi, Caleb Smith. There's a few saves guys out there. Anthony Bass is still there at that area. Diego Castillo. And if you want to go kind of young gun, Tariq Skubal is practically next to him in ADP. So I think that all of those are certainly safer choices than Syndergaard. I'm not necessarily saying better, but safer. Also, one really important thing, Syndergaard didn't have his Tommy John surgery until the last day of March, which means he's about a month behind the other guys. And so I went back and I looked at guys who have had Tommy John in February, March, April for the last 3 or 4 years. And there were 2 names that popped out, Dinelson Lamet and Taijuan Walker. They had theirs in April of 2018. Lamet didn't pitch at all in 2019, and Walker pitched 1 inning. So, both of those had good 2020 seasons, but I don't know if I would take Syndergaard because there's a chance he might not pitch at all, depending on how the recovery goes, or maybe he gets a half a dozen starts. I'd much rather pick one of those other guys.
Yeah, I just think that's too much of a risk personally for me. It's Syndergaard. I love him when he's on the mound, but staying on the mound has sometimes been an issue for him. And what's the last thing to come back for guys coming off of Tommy John? It's command and control. And if he can't command and control that, fire stuff, I mean, it really is amazing when he's healthy. Like it could be a problem, and we could see that walk rate or home run rate, jump up as a result. So, and then you just don't know how many innings. I mean, some projection systems have him for 120, some have him for 90. Like it's just, I don't know if I want to roster a guy for a long time when I don't really have any clue of what he's going to give me. So I'm out on Syndergaard as well. Jordan, what's your next guy?
Okay, I think I might get yelled at for this, but I don't like Brandon Woodruff. Like it's only because of his price, and his ADP might not be completely accurate because more often than not, I feel like he goes round 3, round 4. And I don't know, like he's a decent strikeout pitcher. He's a decent ERA guy too. Like he's decent at everything, but I'd rather have, and it's just my preference. Like I'm not saying he's objectively a bad value, but the way I want to draft, I want to get someone with innings or that I feel very comfortable is going to get ratios and strikeouts. Maybe someone like Hyunjin Ryu would be better for me. The aforementioned Steven Strasburg. And the main thing I don't get with Woodruff, so he was solid in 2019, but the main reason we're drafting him high is because his 2020 was good. And he was in the NL Central. His opponents were really not good. We're making that case for Kenta Maeda, and I don't get in Trevor Bauer, all those guys. And I don't get why the same rule doesn't really apply to Brandon Woodruff. Like, he had a bunch of Central opponents, of course, and he didn't really have to face the White Sox that often. He didn't really have to face he had one matchup against the White Sox, and with the Reds having that weird Babib thing going on for whatever reason, all of the rest of his opponents, I would say, were not good offenses in 2020, and I feel like we're giving him way too much credit for pitching a lot of innings, even though I don't feel like he's proven that. Like, a lot of his starts were 5 innings. And I would just rather have a bunch of other starters in that area that he's going in.
So Jordan coming with the heat right now, going after one of my guys in Brandon Woodruff. Man, I mean, I'm going to disagree with you, but I love me some Brandon Woodruff. I love what I saw last year, and it's building off of the 2019 where we started to see that breakout. I get what you mean. It wasn't great competition in the Central. He does get to face a lot of that Central again, and the Central could be worse this year. The NL Central could be worse this year than it was last year. He'll have to go face some other teams as well. But if you look at his schedule, like, it wasn't like a dumpster fire of teams. Like, he didn't face Pittsburgh 3 or 4 times. He didn't, face the Royals at all. He didn't face the Tigers. So, like, while it was a lighter schedule than maybe he will see this year, it wasn't super light comparatively speaking to a lot of the other guys in the Central. So I'm still taking Woodruff in the 3rd if he's there for me.
Yeah, I get what you mean that he didn't get those tanking AL Central teams, but he did get the Cardinals quite a few times. He got the Cubs, and I know that they both made the playoffs, but I don't think they were good offenses. And it's cool that he did take advantage of the matchups. Not that many people can do that. But I feel like his 2020 is just being way overvalued.
All right. George, give me your next guy.
So my next guy going around pick 50 that I seem to just be passing over in each draft is Tyler Glasnow. So big time, risk reward profile there. I feel like, we're kind of chasing that first half of 2019 before the forearm strain. But since then, I mean, when you include the postseason innings, it's been 93 innings of a 5.03 ERA. So I don't know. There's a lot of question marks there between, he has well-documented control issues, possibly health risk there. The innings concerns with Tampa Bay. I mean, he only had 4 quality starts out of 11 starts. So, with their bullpen there that they don't let their starters go very deep into games. Just the limited pitch mix. He's just a guy that I'm passing over. I think it's just a bit too risky for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. When I'm going to take my SP1, SP2 kind of guy, I want someone I feel really comfortable is going to give me a lot of innings. And I just don't feel that comfortable. 1, he's on the Rays. 2, he's got injury history. He's had issues in the past repeating his mechanics because he's so tall. Like, I see the upside, and I understand why people are getting him. And if you're pairing him with maybe, a stud, as your first SP and he's your second, you probably feel a lot better. But it's just hard for me to pull the trigger on a guy that I don't trust that early.
Yeah.
All right. So what we're doing today is we are raising money for Mental Health America, and that money is going to be all donated to them. Every dollar we raise is going to be donated. You can still donate. You can see on the ticker on the bottom if you're watching live and if you're not watching live, at Justin Mason or Justin Mason Fantasy at gmail.com is the PayPal. and at Justin Salinger is the Venmo. We're going to give away some amazing prizes all weekend. We're going to do some of that right now. And it is, like I said, one of the coolest prizes out there because it's totally different than any other prize. And it's Brian's prize. So, Brian, why don't you tell everybody exactly what it is?
Sure. It's been a tough couple of seasons here because there have been no live auctions. So what I'm going to do is for the winner, if you are within about a 75-mile radius or so of New York, I will come and be your auctioneer at your live auction next spring.
That's amazing. And like I said, Brian's so good at it. And how cool would it be to show off to your buddies that you brought in a heavyweight auctioneer, a guy who really is good at it. And so, yeah, this is super cool. I wish I was eligible and I lived within 75 miles of New York. So I'm going to do a little randomizer here. Richard Zito, you have won. Hopefully you are within 75 miles. If you're not, we'll figure something else out, and maybe I'll give that away later to someone who's a little bit closer. Or, maybe you fly to New York next year with your buddies and do your auction there.
Listen, depending on where the winner lives, I mean, if they're like anywhere near Vegas, for instance, I could hop on a plane. That would be okay.
There you go. That would be amazing. See, I will connect you with Brian, and you guys can figure it out. And like I said, if Richard can't do it, I'll figure out a different prize for him. And then I'll redo it after Podapolooza is over. Sure. So thank you, Brian, so much for that amazing raffle item. Like I said, the most unique, easily of the raffle items that are going to be going off over the next 2 days. There are going to be plenty more raffle items. We've at this point raised, let's see, $3,883.84 for Mental Health America. That's fantastic. Please keep donating. There's going to be prizes given out all weekend, and every $1,000 raised, I'm going to add a TGFBI spot for next year for someone. So last year we raised over $6,000. I put 6 people in this year's TGFBI. If you want to get in TGFBI and you're not in the industry or you haven't won a satellite, this is the way to do it. So keep donating and do that. And Richard is already, see, he's already like commenting. He needs to find a new league now. So, there you go. Yeah, there it is. So, Richard, I will connect you with Brian, and you can find your league and draft or do that live auction because that is super cool. All right. We've got a little bit of time left in this segment, and I don't want to forget to give you guys a chance to promote all your work. So we're going to do that right now so we don't run out of time later going through your last bus. So, George, remind everybody where you can reach on social media and then what you do in the industry.
Yeah, so you could find me on Twitter at Roto_Nino, and I am over at NBC Sports Edge, formerly Roto World. So when you search Roto World, that'll come up, NBC Sports Edge. And I'm also over at Fantrax HQ.
Yeah, and I appreciate the people at NBC Sports Edge making sure that it auto-connected from Roto World because I still instinctively write in Roto World when I'm doing it, and it takes me over to that new NFBC Sports Edge. And a lot of great writers that they've brought on, a lot of great people, friends of mine in the industry. George, you're one of them. I really respect everything you do. So they were smart about the guys they were bringing in.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Justin.
And women. They brought in a few women as well. And I always support more diversity in the industry because I think there's some really great underrepresented voices that need to be heard. Jordan, remind everybody where you can be reached and what you do.
Yeah, so my podcast is Field of Vision Sports. You can just find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then my Twitter and Instagram are both at FOV_sports. So you can find me there. I'll post whenever I drop a podcast, whenever I drop an article, etc. So yeah, just follow me there. Instagram, I try to put out aesthetically pleasing posts 2 times a week. I noticed there are basically no fantasy baseball Instagram accounts, so I decided to do something about that. So find me on Instagram or Twitter, and the podcast that also listen to me there. I have got some pretty cool guests coming on in the next few weeks, including Justin Mason.
Yes, I'm coming back on. I've been on before. I had a blast. Looking forward to coming back on. So definitely go check out Jordan's work on the podcast. And I guess I got to go follow you on Instagram. I don't use the gram very much because outside of what RotoWare thinks, I don't think I've got the best face for Instagram. But apparently they disagree, as we can see by the RotoWare Justin Mason in Deep Thought t-shirt that I am wearing today. But I'll go follow you on the Instagram. I don't post very much over there, but I follow the content. Brian, remind everybody where you can be reached and what you do.
Sure. Website is fantasybaseballauctioneer.com. Twitter handle @fanbbauctioneer. I am a professional gadfly, and I'm doing a lot of writing right now. It's primarily rewriting my son's history and English essays so that he can get into college. I got to tell you, Jordan, I also grew up in St. Louis, and when I was your age, I was working for the Cardinals.
Oh, that's pretty cool. How?
My job was to work. I was up in the press box, and I would bring in the out-of-town scores into the scoreboard operator, so they would change them up on the board. And then every other inning, my job was to bring Busch beer to Jack Buck and Mike Shannon.
Whoa!
That was my job when I was 16 years old.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Like that is awesome. Kev, remind everybody where you can be reached and what you do.
Well, my shit's not as cool as Brian's, but yeah, so follow me right here on @RotoSurgeon over on Twitter. Happy to get involved in any sort of fantasy sports discourse. My podcast, again, The Operating Room, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can find podcasts, essentially. Had Dave McDonald, Run D McD, recently. I know I saw him in the comments right now. So he was on the most recent ep. We discussed how to win fantasy baseball leagues, but I'll have Vlad Selder at RotoGut very soon. I was actually supposed to have him literally like 40 minutes ago, but I didn't realize that this show was at 1 p.m. Pacific time. I thought it was at 4 p.m. and it turned out to be 4 p.m. Eastern time, and that's why I was late. So not to have any excuses, but sorry to Vlad. This is more so to him than anyone else. And sorry to you, Justin, for being late. But yeah, so check out The Operating Room. Fantastic shows with fantastic guests. So thank you again Justin for having me on.
Hey, no, of course, man. And I make that same mistake all the time. Actually, if you go and look at the public copy of the schedule, I actually just added in Pacific time just for my own frame of reference to make sure that I was getting segments moved accordingly and moving the streams and stuff. So I mean, the time zone things, man, they can be thrown off for sure because I'm on Pacific time as well. Dave, remind everybody where you can be reached and what you do.
All right, so Twitter handle is Davidius. I write a lot of DFS. You get it over at Rotoballer, Pitcher List, and at Fantrax this year.
All right. So we got about 2 minutes. So we're going to have to do a speed round here for our last one. So give us your, Dave, give us your fade and just a little nugget of why you're fading them.
John Means, I just don't believe that he's a very good pitcher. I hate his division. I hate who he has to go up against. There's too many things I don't believe in the small sample.
All right. And that's not a great park to pitch in. And he's one of those guys where I want to buy in, but I just haven't found myself taking him and taking other guys instead. So I'm kind of on board with you there. Kev, who's your last guy?
Last guy, Tristan McKenzie. He's getting picked in the top 200, like around 180 or so at NFC right now. And I love Tristan McKenzie. I love his stuff. I love the swagger he brings on the mound, but I'm not buying into a guy with 33 innings pitched since 2018 with back issues. No thanks. The Indians have several starting pitchers that they can use in rotation. They could put Tristan McKenzie on a solid schedule where they put him in AAA, they bring him back, and I'm not going to deal with that all season. They have Cal Quantrill, they have Adam Plutko that they're going to use probably as an SP5. So McKenzie's going to get so limited that I don't want to play that game and figure out when he's going to start or if he's a long man. No, thank you.
He's one of those guys, if you could turn off injuries like in MLB The Show, he would be an absolute stud, right? And I love the skills. When I'm watching him pitch, I just go, oh my God, this guy could be an ace. And this is why he was a top pitching prospect. But but he hasn't been able to stay healthy, and that slight frame is probably something to do with it. I mean, he's that tall, kind of really lanky guy, and some of those guys don't hold up over time. So I I've taken a few shots on him just to have some exposure, but definitely not a target for me at all. Brian, who's your last guy?
Last guy under the I'll take Tommy John guys for 200. Luis Severino. Luis Severino currently going at 439, 36th round. Same reasons as the other ones on the most part. Two things. One is I don't know why you wouldn't take Adam Wainwright at the same spot. Talk about a steady presence. Of the three guys I've listed, Severino is the one that I would probably be more open to take a chance on. He's the youngest of them, of the three, and he was also the first one to get the surgery. So theoretically, he should be a month ahead of the other two guys. And he's playing for a playoff contender, and he's got the strongest bullpen behind him, which means probably not as many blown wins as the Red Sox and the Mets.
All right. We're going to wrap this up here really, really fast. So, Jordan, give me your guy real quick.
I've got Blake Snell, just workload.
All right. And, George, your last guy.
My last guy, I just can't buy into Framber Valdez. I think he kind of overperformed a bit last year. Play discipline metrics looked identical to 2019, but we saw the strikeout rate jump. Walk rate, too, was the lowest of his career. Generally had been between 7 to 15% throughout his professional career, 13% in 2019. So between that and getting hit hard, his StatCast page isn't exactly red. So for those reasons, I'm just kind of fading Valdez.
Oh, man. All right. We don't have time to dig into this one, but we will another time for sure, George. Thank you guys all for joining me. I'm going to remove you and bring in the next crew for this Podapolooza segment. Joining me right now is one of my favorite people in the industry. Chris at Baseball Pods is joining us. Ray Kuhn is joining us. Brandon Karaman is joining us. Tim McLeod is joining us, and Stephen Rapin is joining us as well. Steve, welcome to the show. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and then plug what you do in the industry.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at FantasyGeek37. I'm over at FightingChanceFantasy.com, and we just started a brand new. We got a lot of young talent for baseball this year, and so we want to try to get them some experience behind the mic, and we're doing a really fun podcast, Fantasy Baseballing, it's called. So you can go to our Twitter feed and find it, or the website find it, and we're just having a blast. Thanks for having me on, Justin.
Of course. My great friend, Tim McLeod. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Justin. You can find me at Twitter, RunTMCP361, or on Facebook. I spend most of my time doing twice weekly podcasts with my good friend Rich Wilson, the P361 podcast. When I'm not podcasting, I'm ranking, filing, and doing a weekly waiver wire geared mainly to 15-20 team sort of formats. When I'm not there, I can be found at Patton and Company or the P365 Facebook group. Off season, I spend most of my time looking for the next Ichiro and wondering how and why I spent most of my fab money on Roger Pavlik in 1994.
That's great. Brandon, welcome to the show. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and plug what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Justin, for having me. And I love that you do this every year now. I work for Fantistics, InsiderBaseball.com. You can find me on Twitter at B_Cameraman. You can see my last name spelled right there. And I'm excited to be a part of this and talk about what we got going on today. Thanks, Justin.
Of course. And my main man, Ray Kuhn, is here. Ray, welcome to the show.
Go on, Justin. Thanks for having me. On Twitter at Ray_Kuhn_28. And I do most of my baseball work right now over at Fantasy Benefits with the podcast.
Yes,
Justin is over there. And then hopefully get back into some writing over there this year as well.
All right. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Ray. We've done some some team previews over at Friends Fantasy Benefits, and we're definitely going to do more podcasts over there. So definitely follow Ray. And then, of course, it's Chris from at Baseball Pods. the creator of the tourney, the bracket for the podcast. Chris, remind everybody where you can reach the social media and then talk about what you do.
So I'm at Baseball Pods. That's my Twitter handle. As you said, I keep the Chinese bots hungry by running a podcast tournament where fantasy baseball analysts have to sync to bringing in a bunch of foreign elements into our game. That's kind of a joke, but maybe not. Who knows? I also run a website called baseball-pods.com where I do a little bit of analysis. I put out about an article a week. I think the main thing there that's interesting, if you're interested in content, is I do have a Dynasty 500 that I'm on the verge of updating. I thought it'd be updated by today, but Dynasty lists are really hard when you haven't seen prospects in 2 years. So that's where you can find me. And Tim, I did not know Fab existed in 1994. I certainly didn't call it that. And I just want to say, Steve, I love your voice, and I hope you do a John Goodman impression.
I more look like John Goodman, maybe John Goodman before he lost all the weight than a John Goodman impression.
No, I think you sound like John Goodman even more than you look like him. So I just want to throw that out there. You're going to be like the John Goodman of the fantasy community now. There's no doubt about it.
I'm changing my Twitter handle as we speak. So thank you, Chris.
Oh, that's great. We're raising money today for Mental Health America, and we're also talking fantasy baseball. If you want to donate to this cause for Podapolooza, justinmasonfantasy@gmail.com or on Venmo at Justin Salinger. Every dollar donated goes to Mental Health America, and it gets you entered in to win some of these amazing raffle prizes. We'll be giving away more at the end of this segment and throughout the entire weekend. But let's jump into our fantasy talk. And on this section, we're going to talk about some old faces in new places. So people who switch teams either via free agency or via trade. And we're going to start with my main man, George Springer, the bathwater that I drink. He has moved on out of Houston, away from the trash cans, to a new location. So, Chris, what are your thoughts on George Springer for this year?
I mean, it's interesting when I was looking at this list in general. One of the things that struck me as a general theme, not with everybody, because Ha-Seong Kim, for example, is brand new to us, but I don't know how much really has changed. I mean, I love George Springer in Houston. I love George Springer in Toronto. Looks like he'll lead off at least to start the year, although that Toronto lineup, I think, could be in flux until they figure it out and start banging out runs. I don't think he's going to run very much, just because not so much because of his age, but because of that. I mean, why would you run when you have so many bangers hitting underneath you in a lineup? I love George Springer, and I think he's a very safe outfield one. If he's down, if he falls to where I think he goes, he should be an ADP, and he fits into my draft plan. I would love to have him. He's also very handsome.
Yes, very handsome. Great bathwater, made for a fantastic T-shirt that I still own. So I'm right there with you on Springer. Ray, what are your thoughts on Springer for this year?
I like him. I mean, obviously, selfishly, I'm not happy that he left Houston, but I think he's going to about lead off, and I think it's also interesting how long Toronto's ready to start the season. Because, I mean, so far, the early park rankings things, it looks like it's going to be a top 5 hitters park, so that might give him a little bit of boost to start. I mean, other than that, batting lead off, everything should pretty much be the same as we saw last year, the year before.
All right. And then, Brandon, what are your thoughts on Springer?
Yeah, I really like Springer. I mean, it was a concern when he had some years in Houston in such a good lineup. Where would he go? Well, he goes to another great lineup that, maybe is just as exciting as when Houston was starting to kind of come on, and he was a big part of that. So now he almost provides a veteran presence and instead of sort of being the younger guy as part of the Houston lineup. So I think that's a nice place to be in. I think there's going to be a comfort level with that. And I think, he's fluctuated a little bit with his batting average. I see him as more of a 290s guy than 260s. I really think, he's got the contact skills. He's got certainly good on base. We know that. I agree. I think the stolen bases aren't something you're buying into with him at this point, but we know he can hit home runs. He's in a good lineup, so he should provide runs and ribbies for you. And I do think he's going to provide some good average for you.
Yeah, and you never know. I mean, this is a guy that was like a 30-30 guy in the minor leagues. I'm not going to project him to gain a bunch of stolen bases, but Houston's been a team that has not liked to run very much over the last few years, and maybe that changes a little bit on a more aggressive Blue Jays team. So a little bit of added upside on a guy who's actually pretty safe as well. Tim, what are your thoughts on Springer?
Yeah, as a Canadian, I have to echo everybody else's thoughts, or they boot me out of the country. But no, I like what Springer brings to the table for the Jays. And the one thing, as Brandon hinted on and mentioned, is the fact that it's a very young club. You know, you got Vlad Jr., you got Bijou, you got Bichette, you got a lot of young talent, and I think that. I know we're not supposed to talk about intangibles, but I think Springer brings a big one to the Jays in that he's got that playoff presence. He's been there, and I think he'll help a lot with the younger kids and take a lot of pressure off of them as the season progresses. So on top of all the statistical factors involved, I think it's a really good fit for Toronto. I think they're going to be very happy with him leading off for the Dunedin Blue Jays.
All right. And Steve, what are your thoughts on Springer?
Well, I'm afraid if I disagree with everyone on the panel, I'm going to get my butt kicked. So I have to echo it. Look, he was on a good team, a good lineup. He's going to a good lineup. He's staying in the American League. There shouldn't be too much of a change there. So I know the one thing that wasn't mentioned, and I know ballpark factors are something that can be erratic from year to year, but last year it was pretty. I mean, Rogers Center in Toronto, first in runs. Houston was 30th in runs. Toronto was second in home runs. Houston was 30th. Second in hits for Toronto, 32nd in hits for Houston. So, maybe he gets a bump in ballpark factors. Still in a good lineup, and so I agree. He's a guy that we talk about stolen bases. I still think 5+ stolen bases, a half dozen stolen bases is there, and he's one of the top outfielders.
All right. It seems like everybody's in lockstep on the first one. So let's just move on over and talk about the next guy that is a old face in a new place, and that's James McCann signed a free agent deal with the Mets. So, Steve, what are your thoughts on McCann for this season?
I just wish he kind of would have broken out when he was with my Tigers. And so, yeah, I mean, I like James McCann. He's a guy that gives you some power upside. He's kind of shown that power the last couple years. He hit 7 last year, which was tied for 7th among catchers, but he by far had the fewest plate appearances out of that group. So, I mean, I can easily see 15 to 20. And look, looking at Steamer projections, they only have four catchers projected over 20 home runs, and really it wouldn't surprise me if McCann reached that. So I think he's going to get a bump in plate appearances this year. So he's a guy that I definitely going to be targeting at the catcher position.
All right. Tim, do you have thoughts on James McCann?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I find a bit concerning are the strikeout rates. Okay, I don't think we're going to see much more than 240, 250 out of McCann this year. But at 240, 250, that makes him a top 10 catcher in that wasteland that we call catching. So I like him, but I'm tempering my expectations as far as the batting average is concerned, guys.
Are you tempering your expectations, Brandon?
Absolutely. Actually, that was exactly what I was going to say, too. He had a high BABIP, too, last year. So, I think 250s is probably reasonable. He's had a couple of years now where he's had a nice batting average for a catcher. I think the good thing, though, on the other side is he should, obviously last year he didn't have regular playing time. He should have regular playing time. He's a starting catcher. And that Mets lineup is underrated. I mean, even before Lindor, I feel like people don't realize how good the Mets offense is, and he slots into that with regular playing time. So for a catcher, he's definitely a catcher one that can provide some really nice stats for you, and you get him depending on your draft and league. I feel like you get him at value behind some of the other guys that have the bigger names.
Chris, are you in agreement?
Yeah, I am. And I hear a lot of analysis on catchers, and some people are like, well, I grab JT or grab Will Smith, or I go and just wait till the end. I'm a big believer in the middle class of catchers. I don't like the dumpster diving for my catchers. I also don't want to take an early pick, like a third or fourth rounder. So McCann is squarely in my wheelhouse. He's a type of catcher that I'm happy to get, along with Christian Vasquez and others, where I feel like you're going to get good playing time. I think Tim's right about the batting average, but I think that's probably I think that's a floor for him, 230, 240. I don't think he's going to go that much lower than that. Whereas there are others like I also kind of like I like Alfaro's skills, but if he hit 205, I wouldn't blink. You know what I mean? So I like him where he's going as well in drafts, not just independent of his skill set. I think he's going to accumulate and not kill my batting average, and that's what I'm looking for out of my middle class catchers.
What about you, Ray? Where are you at on James McCann?
I like him. I mean, he's a catcher. I mean, catchers are tough. I think pretty much top 10 to 15 guy. He's going to get playing time. Batting average won't kill you too bad, and he has some power. He's taken some strides the last 2 years. So I'm interested to see how much past 20 homers he can get, or I mean, even still 15, 20, he's a top 10 or 15 guy.
Yeah, I think there were some people early on in draft season that were like prorating out like what he was doing in the smaller plate appearances in Chicago. I don't think you can do that. One, it's the part change is going to affect his power output a little bit, and he's going to see a lot more plate appearances, and I think there's some regression in that. He's going to get exposed a little bit. That being said, like I don't mind the price where he's going. He is going to be in a very, very good lineup in New York. I agree with you, Brandon. Like that is an underrated lineup prior to the Lindor trade and just got better. So I don't mind taking McCann, and I'm with Chris on the middle class of catchers. It's usually, if I'm going to pull a catcher before my last few rounds, it's going to be in that middle class of the Nolas, the McCanns, that kind of area. All right. Our next guy we're going to talk about is Robbie Grossman. He leaves Oakland and gets a multi-year deal with the Tigers, which I was a little surprised about, but it's a really interesting fit for them. So, Ray, as I attempt to unmute your microphone for you, though it's for some reason not wanting to. I apologize.
Maybe frozen.
Yeah, he may be frozen. All right. So I'll go back to you, Chris. Why don't you go ahead and tell me your thoughts on Robbie Grossman?
Grossman's a guy I had liked for a little while, just as a late round kind of guy to keep your eye on the bench. And then last year, I don't know, I ended up with him on a lot of teams, and he was very helpful, certainly like a very useful player. And in Detroit, I think he'll get run. I actually like I think it's dangerous to get a lot of Detroit hitters, but there are a lot of Detroit hitters that I like late. They're similar to the Giants in that way, in the sense that there are a lot of, I think, good players, and Grossman's one of them, that are going to get a lot of at-bats, and I think they're going to give you decent count and stats and not kill you. I don't know if he's going to, that much speed at his age is an interesting thing to see, like how that's going to go forward. But I figure Detroit's going to run as well to create runs. So I think he's a nice little target. And if I'm not mistaken, I think in Jeff Zimmerman's Mining the News articles, and one of them, which are of course invaluable, I'm pretty sure they said that they're thinking about batting Grossman towards the top of the lineup as well. So I think there's going to be – last year there were really good values in Detroit. Like Willie Castro was a really nice little value. And I think this year you're going to find it with guys like Grossman, maybe Jacoby Jones if he can stay healthy. And I like Castro again as, late round guys. You can't build your team with Robbie Grossman's. But as complementary pieces later in the draft, I will be surprised if he's not on a number of my rosters.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a really nice value. And like you said, I believe he's projected to hit second right now, which it's not an atrocious lineup. Like it's not a complete dumpster fire, and batting towards the top, he will score some runs. I do worry about the speed a little bit, but I'll let Brandon chime in here. What are your thoughts on Robbie Grossman?
Yeah, safe, I think, is a good for this theme of what we're talking about with guys in new places where there's always, a little concern about how the fit's going to work. I feel like a guy who just makes good contact. He's a great eye, and that's a guy that you feel pretty safe that there's a pretty nice floor there, regardless of what lineup they're playing in. Because with Robbie Grossman, you're not paying for 25 home runs. You're not. I don't think any of us think he's stealing 20 bases.
No.
And his average might be okay, but we're not paying for this. So you're just looking for something safe at that value, and I think you're going to get that even if we can say, like you said, there's a lot to like about the Detroit lineup, much to what other people might think about it. But even if it's clearly a worse lineup that he's in, there's still a safe skill set that he has for you. So I think Robbie Grossman's nice. I love him in a points league. I know maybe that's out of fashion, but I do like him in a points league. It's just, in a standard roto league, he's safe and not going to win you the league, but a nice guy that you can have for value.
Yeah, he's a glue guy, right? And he's one of those guys that he's going to – they gave him a 2-year contract, so you've got to think that means they intend to play him every day. It wasn't this 1-year pillow kind of contract. So, he's going to be an accumulator. It's not going to be sexy. It's not going to win your league, but it helps you kind of make sure you get production at every spot, and you're getting that late. Tim, what are your thoughts on Robbie Grossman?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with the rest of the panel. The only thing I'd like to mention is if you're playing in an OBP league, bump him up a little bit. He's got a really solid track record of producing really good OBPs, so I'd bump him up a bit. Next year, things might get a little bit tricky if you're looking at dynasty leagues because there's a lot of most to feed, and we're going to see Riley Green and there's Daz Cameron and Victor Reyes. There's a lot of potential most to feed, but I'm perfectly fine with him as a number 5 this year.
All right, and Steve, what are your thoughts on Robbie Grossman?
Yeah, I think Tim, kind of hit the point on the head there when he talked about prospects and that. And, the Tigers, they're in a rebuilding stage, but their outfield seems to be a little bit behind maybe where the pitchers are. And this year, I don't expect to see a lot of those prospects. We've seen Kristen Stewart, and he hasn't necessarily lit it up. Same with Daz Cameron a little bit. He might project a little bit more as a center fielder, but I think it wouldn't surprise me if we seen a career high plate appearances for Robbie Grossman. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, the last couple of years he struggled pretty bad against lefties. So if they don't use him necessarily as a splits hitter and put him in against the lefties, well, that maybe cause his batting average to come down a little bit. But it still wouldn't surprise me if he had, I don't want to say a career year, but double-digit home runs, close to double-digit steals, and kind of on a underrated. I'm not going to say the Tigers are a great team, but like we said, they're a decent team in a decent lineup.
There you go, Ray. What are your thoughts on Robbie Grossman there?
My thing with Grossman is, the last month his ADP is 400 in the NFBC, so the guy's essentially free. We're talking about somebody that at minimum is a 10-10 guy with a little bit of upside in either direction in both categories. So why not take the chance on him? Second half of the year, either maybe he gets traded, some of the young guys do come up, whatever. But at that price, I'm going to give him a shot.
And Shelly V is in agreement. Robbie, not so Grossman. Love him late in drafts. And everybody knows Shelly is one of the smartest fantasy players, my partner in that tag team draft that we did last week. So when she says something, I believe it. I believe in Shelly.
Justin, I just have to say, interrupt and say I'm disappointed that the chat beat Tim to a pun, though. I've been waiting this entire panel for a classic Tim McLeod pun. So Shelly comes in there and steals your thunder, Tim. That can't feel good.
I put my big boy pants on today, guys, so I'm going to try and be respectable for once.
Oh, no, you can drop some puns on us every once in a while. Here's an opportunity, but I'm going to start with Ray on this one. Brad Hand is going to be the closer, it seems, in Washington. Are you buying that Brad Hand can continue the excellent work we saw from him last year in Cleveland in Washington?
I will leave any puns on the table for now. But, Davey Martinez said the other day, in a perfect world, he's the closer. I don't know what he's trying to say. I think Hand is going to be the closer in Washington. Why else would they give him $10 million? Again, he's a closer, so is there really a sure thing when you're drafting a closer? But I think he is one of the better options last year. He saved 16 games, struck out a bunch of guys. So, as much as I don't like doing it. If you're going to commit to a closer early, he's one of the top 5 to 8 options, I think.
All right, Steve, what are your thoughts on Brad Hand going to Washington?
I'm not as high on Brad Hand as some this year. I mean, if the guys over at Pitcher List had an interesting note that I hadn't realized, but since 2016, he's pitched in the most games among relieving pitchers, and among relievers, he's had the second most innings over that time. So he's been heavily worked the last 4 or 5 years. Over the course of the time, his velocity has dropped each of the last 2 years, from 93.8% to 92.7 to 91.4. Last year, he saw quite a significant decline in his swing and miss. Like the swinging strike rate was down, the swing strike rate was down. There's some warning signs there that make me a little bit nervous about him. So, I mean, I still think he's a top, 10 to 12. I don't know if I'd quite put him in my top 8. He's still a good pitcher, but there's some warning signs that make me a little bit nervous of Brad Hand this year.
All right. Are you nervous about the Brad Hand in Washington there, Tim?
No, I think the slider's fine. We saw a little bit of an uptick in velocity towards the end of last year. I'm perfectly fine with Brad Hand as a number, 5 through 8, somewhere in that range closer. He's got the job. There's no way, Tanner Rainey might be the closer of the future, but we got to see some health there. And Daniel Hudson, nah. So I feel fairly confident that Hand will get it done this year.
It's one of those things, too, where you got to kind of look at the track record of the manager, right? And, Washington the last few years has just stuck with their guy unless there's been an injury. Daniel Hudson had an ERA over 6 last year, and they still kept running him out there in the ninth. So, I kind of believe in Brad Hand that he's going to have a really long leash, considering that they paid him the money. Brandon, what are your thoughts on Hand?
I think that's a great point about what David Martinez has done there in Washington. What the hell are we doing with closers this year, man? We can probably say that every year. I just feel like it has been my Achilles heel through my early drafts is I cannot figure out how to deal with closers. And I think Brad Hand is a guy that, in this year, in 2021, he's probably a guy I feel pretty confident is a guy who should get 20 plus saves and, obviously has the potential to do much better than that. But I don't know if I feel great about it. Tim, you brought up Tanner Rainey, and I like Tanner Rainey. I mean, he's not going to be the closer to start the season, but I do think there's some potential there. And how long is Brad Hand's leash? Well, they brought him in to be the closer. And like you said, Justin, they're probably going to give him somewhat of a leash, but I'm not just convinced that if he doesn't struggle, which I think is possible, he's got good skills, but I think it's possible he struggles, that they don't pull him maybe earlier than we'd all like. So I just don't feel great about closers, and maybe that doesn't help anybody that's listening right now because I haven't helped myself throughout this early part of the draft process.
What we're going to do, Brandon, is we're going to spend 80% of our fab chasing saves. How's that?
For a guy that we can play for 3 weeks before he's replaced.
3? I'm hoping for 2, Steve.
And Shelly and I took Brad Hand in that tag team draft, but we backed him up later on in that draft with Tanner Rainey. My only concern with Rainey is he's never had a save opportunity, I don't believe. So, they've never actually given him the chance to be the closer. You know how those managers love those guys with closer experience. So, they could go back to garbage Daniel Hudson. Chris, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, he's only 30 on the one hand, right? On the one hand. So he's only 30, but he has had a lot of mileage on the arms. I don't really trust him. He's going 42nd if you look at the online NFBC ADP, and that's too rich for me. I'm sorry. He's going there. He's there as a 42nd pitcher, off the board.
Oh.
So what that means is, you're taking him around above guys like Julio Urias and Sixto Sanchez. And unlike catchers, I'd rather go either with an elite closer or go lower. I feel like the middle class of catchers, you're overpaying in general. So I think he's probably in the 10 to 12 range in terms of how I rank closers. And I don't think it's terrible. And I think if you get him, you need to back him up. But if you're playing like NFBC, do you want to back him up? So for me, it's like I'd rather, if this is a little bit format dependent, in a draft and hold, I'm fine. Grab him, grab Rainey later, do whatever. Like, that's good. In an NFBC where there's an overall or you're competing or TGFBI, not to tip my hand, but I would probably try to go a little higher with a closer or just decide, you know what, I'm not overpaying because there's too many other good values on the board, and I'll shoot some darts towards the end. And Tim and I can box each other out on the waiver wire trying to grab whoever's hot.
All right. What we're doing today is we are raising money for Mental Health America. Every dollar you donate gets donated to that organization that does such good work supporting people with mental illness in this country. So far, we have raised, and I should double check before I announce it. We're $4 short of $4,000. So
I'll give you $4, Justin. You got it. You got it. $4 more.
We'll make that up as soon as we get off the air, Justin.
Yeah. So keep donating. We're gonna give away a prize right now for all of you who have donated. It's baseball memorabilia from Chris. So, Chris, do you want to say exactly what that
Thanks for putting me on the spot there, Justin. Last year I donated like one of the last a ball that was from the last game at Yankee Stadium. So this year I will donate a ball that is signed by JD Drew. JD Drew autograph. Completely not validated. You're going to have to trust me that I'm not going to write JD Drew's autograph on the ball, but that's what's going into the pot this year.
All right. So I have a funny story about JD Drew. I traded for JD Drew in my original AL only keeper league. I got a $14 JD Drew, and I gave up this prospect who was drafted and then premiered that year. It was $1 Chris Sale. And so that I won the championship, but then had to watch someone for the next 3 years have $1 Chris Sale in my AL only keeper league. So
flags fly forever, Justin. Flags fly forever.
Yeah.
It's not just a podcast.
Yes, a win is a win. I don't regret that trade at all. And Andrew Sullivan, you are the winner of that prize. I will connect you with Chris and figure out how to get that all worked out. Thank you so much.
I look forward to discussing. I look forward to discussing his neoconservative political views.
Oh, I did not know that. So
maybe it's like I'm hoping that it's the Andrew Sullivan that is writes for all these various think tanks and magazines. So I'm just going to assume that it's the only Andrew Sullivan.
I'm thinking there might be more than one. So
doubtful, highly doubtful.
We'll find out. You let me know, and
I will.
We'll talk about that on a future episode of some sort of pod I have you on. So there we go. Before we move on to the next guy, I want to give everybody another chance to promote what they do in the industry and where you can be reached. So Ray, remind everybody where you can be reached in the industry or on social media, and then talk about what you do.
Ray_Kuhn_28 on social media. You'll find me at Friends with Fantasy Benefits, and that's where you'll find my baseball content.
All right. Steve, remind everybody where you can be reached and what you do.
My new Twitter tag is @FantasyGoodman. No, I'm just joking. @FantasyGeek37. You can find me at fightingchancefantasy.com. And even though I'm not on every week, we rotate through the baseball staff. You can find us in the Fantasy Baseball and Fantasy Baseball podcast.
There you go. Tim, remind everybody where you can be reached and what you do in the industry.
Yeah, you can get me on Twitter at RunTMCP361. I spend a lot of time on Facebook on the Baseball 365 page. My regular gig is at Prospect 361, and occasionally I'm hiding out at Patton & Company. Thanks for having me on, Justin.
All right. Brandon, remind everybody where you can be reached and what you do.
Yeah, find me on Twitter at B_Cameraman. I'm with Fantastics. You can find me on insiderbaseball.com and, post, I would say, preseason, kind of have a weekly column up once the season starts 2 or 3 times a week.
And then, Chris, of course, where can people reach you and what do you do?
At Baseball Pods, where I review, listen, review, and just share the great work that many podcasts do out there. I see Andrew Sullivan has just popped up, and he appears to be a Blues Brothers impersonator and not a neoconservative. So I actually look forward to the conversation even more now.
All right.
But I'm at Baseball Pods, baseball-pods.com. I've got a series of articles called Five Guys to make you crave burgers and also give you some fantasy information. Those have been officially endorsed by Vlad Sedler now, so I'm looking forward to my Roto Gut Bump. So please take a look at those. Just doing my best out there to contribute to this wonderful community and try to keep up with the great beards on this panel.
All right. So we've got about 10 minutes left. We can talk about at least one other, maybe even two other guys. I'm going to kind of skip ahead to Ha-Seong Kim because Tim knows about Korean baseball, Japanese baseball, and so this is a guy that I've been infatuated with. I've gotten to watch him play a little bit in the KBO, really tantalized by the skills. What are your thoughts on Ha-Seong Kim, Tim?
Yeah, I'm proudly wearing my Bandits cap from the ABL today. So, I spend a lot of time in Asia, and I like Kim. And one of the reasons that I like him, other than basically the skill sets, is the age. Okay, we very rarely ever see a bat under the age of 27, 28 either posted or transferring to North America. And when you're looking at dynasty leagues especially, there won't be the immediate pressure to produce. A lot of the older players that come over, they're on, 1, 2, 3 year deals, and they've got to get going right out of the gate. They can exercise some patience with Kim, and he's got all the skills to be successful. I think he's going to open the season as a starting second baseman. I think he's going to push Cronenworth to the bench. Whether or not he holds the job, only time will tell, but I like him a lot long term. Speed, power, the on-base skills are very, very solid. So I'm bullish, big time.
I'm bullish as well. I'm a little concerned about the playing time since they've brought in so many guys this year, but I do believe in the talent. Steve, do you believe in the talent or are you fading him?
I do believe in the talent, but coming over initially, his ADP right now is about 183 over the last 30 days on the NFBC. And so in a 15-team league, that's about a 12th rounder. And man, with Cronenworth having a great year last year, I do worry about playing time with his adjustment over here. I think the talent is great, and I'm a guy that likes to swing for the fences. That price tag does scare me off just a little bit if he doesn't get regular playing time or he struggles to the American game.
Ray, what are your thoughts?
Based on the talent, based on what he did in the KBO, it's hard not to like the guy. But again, as everyone else is saying, the playing time is going to be a concern. But I'm not a Cronenworth guy, so it wouldn't surprise me if he takes second base from him. He's also been working in the outfield. Between Pham and Myers, I doubt those guys stay healthy all year. So I think some playing time for somebody will free up there. So again, his price I think has come down in the NFBC over the past month. So if the price is right, I'm going to take the chance on him, but he's probably more of a dynasty guy than a this year guy.
What are your thoughts, Chris?
So I think Cronenworth's a better real life player than a fantasy player, and his glove and his arm are legit. He can play multiple positions, and I think he finds his way into the lineup more often than not. I love Kim. I loved watching him in the KBO. Love watching highlights of him. I think, like Ray said, get him in Dynasty. In fact, the best time to get him in Dynasty, maybe if he starts the season and he doesn't get full-time at bats, that's when don't try to get Kim in Dynasty now. Wait until he's on the bench for a little while. And that's when I would be targeting him. In terms of redraft, I'll probably not be getting a lot of either of them unless it's late. But I do agree with Ray. Tommy Pham got stabbed really badly. There's a little bit of levity in it because it happened at his strip club, and it's ha ha. But if you look at his back, that's a legit injury. We all saw it on Twitter. And he, by the way, he didn't have this amazing track record of health before that. He's one of my favorite players to root for because he likes to stick it to the man and fight the power, and I'm all about that. And he speaks his mind in a way that I feel like few players have until recent years. So I love that about Pham, but he has a hard time staying healthy. And I think there's a couple of other potential ways that both Cronenworth and Kim could make it in the lineup. But we also can't forget that they've got Jurickson and Profar now. I mean, AJ Preller went and tried to build a dynasty team, and while the rest of baseball wasn't deciding to try to compete. So I think all three of those players are players that I'll take later if they fall to me. But in most redrafts, I'm probably not going to target any of them, and I doubt I'll really have many shares of them on my rosters.
All right, Brandon, finish us out on Kim.
Yeah, I think AJ Preller's in a draft and hold league and is just trying to stack up as much depth as he can. Because it's a great point. I mean, I think if Tim's right and he's starting the year, in the starting lineup at second base, then I like him a lot in a redraft league. And I think there might be some time that pitchers need to make adjustments to him. Now, we do have more tape on KBO than we maybe did years ago. And so maybe that adjustment does come a little bit quicker, but I think it's possible he comes out firing him. I like him in a redraft league, and I kind of like him maybe if you can get him now, because if there is some sort of momentum towards him getting the starting, or we hear that he's going to be the starter, he's going to fly up in ADP. And so I kind of like him now, maybe ends up being a steal for you.
I think he's got top 10 potential in bat flips as well, guys.
Oh man, I can't. I hope nobody translates that you're not supposed to do that in Major League Baseball.
They already have, Justin. And he knows he's got to be restrained in Major League Baseball. He's already made that comment. So.
Eric Hosmer. We all saw what Hosmer did to Tatis last year in public. I mean, let's just be clear. That's definitely, hopefully, over the long term, that culture changes. But Brian McCann has a significant influence still in this game, unfortunately.
No, I mean, you got to drop him a few rounds if you don't believe he's going to bat flip, right?
2 at least.
Yeah, I mean, all right. Let's finish out this one with let's see. We have a few more. Nate Lowe, he gets traded over to Texas. There was a huge free Nate Lowe contingent. His price hasn't gone through the roof in the way that a lot of people thought it would. So, Tim, what are your thoughts on Nate Lowe in Texas?
2 words sum it up very eloquently. Ronald Guzman. I'll turn it over. The opportunity is there. Guzman has had it. He hasn't done anything with it. There's way too much miss in Guzman's swing and miss game. So the opportunity is there. And I think if you're looking at filling your DH slot or a bench slot, you can get them late right now. So I'm willing to take a chance on that opportunity. I won't be looking at him as a first baseman, though. I want something a little bit more proven that I can shore my lineup up. But overall, I think he's got a good shot to run with the job all year.
All right, Steve, what are your thoughts on Nate Lowe?
I agree. And one of the things that would have concerned me is if, say, the splits were off between him and Guzman, but Lowe has been better against righties and lefties than Guzman. So it's not like we're going to see, one of them versus righties and one versus lefties. I think it's his job for the taking. And so I think he's finally get an opportunity to show. So, yeah, I like him. A late round pick that could put some solid production for you.
Brandon, what are your thoughts on Lowe?
Yeah, I think he's better than Ronald Guzman. I think that's pretty clear. I still think there might be some sort of competition there. Steve was talking about the splits a little bit. Neither of them are good against lefties. I mean, Guzman's miserable against lefties, and so he's a swing hard guy, and that can be good in a fantasy league because he's going to connect with the ball sometimes. He's going to miss a bunch, and so, I do not want him as my and first base is deeper than it's been recently. So I don't think you need him as your first baseman. I think that's kind of a mistake if he ends up being your first baseman. But as a backup or a corner infield guy, sure, he'll hit some home runs and he's in a nice ballpark.
Chris, are you in on Nate Lowe?
So I was a big free Nate Lowe guy, and I've been rooting for him for years. I'm in on him where Tim got him, but I think there's upside. I love him in an overall format. So a few things. And also, so OBP league, he becomes a much different target for me. OBP league, he moves from that DH slot that Tim was talking about to a corner target for me. Texas is going to play him. We've seen Ronald Guzman do it, or not do it for years. And I actually think there's a little sneaky chance. I will see how Texas plays it this year. He's got above average speed. for a first baseman especially. But he's like, his sprint speed, I think, was like 55th or 60th percentile. He's not like a plotter. And in a lineup that's going to need to create runs, who knows? Maybe you get 5 to 8 bags there that you weren't expecting either. So I like Nate Lowe as a DH, and then an OBP league, bump him up. And in a place where if you're looking to really like pull a lottery ticket, he's one of the lottery tickets I'm going to punch.
That's a really good point about his speed too, because especially the Rangers were first or second in the major leagues last year in stolen bases. They really push it on the base paths there. So that's something I actually had not even thought about before. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm going to incorporate that into my rankings.
In none of the leagues that we're drafting together should you remember that, though.
Okay, I'll forget it when we draft against each other. Ray, what are your thoughts on Lowe?
I mean, that's a good point. OBP league, I think he has a little more value, but based on his price, he's pretty much free. I don't know that running enough to grab him in any leagues. He's a borderline corner infield, 15-team league guy for me. It's just a little bit of upside there, but I mean, I think the most he's hit combined is 23 home runs in a year. I think it was 2019 between AAA and the majors. So I'm not super into him, but at his price, I don't know that it matters.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining me on Podapolooza this year. I got to remove you guys and bring in the next crew. So unceremoniously, I'm kicking you all out little by little. Thank you guys so much. We are raising money for Mental Health America. We are going to be going for another few hours today. And then we're going again all day tomorrow. And going to be raising as much money as we can for a really, really great cause in mental health support through Mental Health America. Joining me right now is a fantastic crew of guys. And as I mute Vlad Sedler a little bit, this is my NFBC crew. I'm bringing in some guys who have just been amazing NFBC participants over the course of their NFBC careers, including Toby Batfit Crazy. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey, Justin, how's it going? Really excited to be here. It seems like a fantastic panel, myself excluded. So really excited to be here and talk some fantasy baseball.
I'm glad you're here. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media, and then plug what you do.
Sure. On social media at Batflip Crazy, and my name down there somewhere. And I do a podcast called Batflip Crazy Fantasy Baseball. I do it along with Bubba, and who does the Bench with Bubba podcast. So we put that out every Tuesday night, generally speaking, but once a week. So that's where you can find me. And you were the first person to ever equate projections with some sort of romantic to erotic scale, which you can go hear on the TGFBI podcast this last week. It was fantastic. For sure. I need to find space to add that into my Twitter bio, but we'll see. We'll see what we can do. Joining us as well is Scott Genstead. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me. How long can we keep Vlad on mute for? It's going to be awesome.
I mean, as long as my button allows me to click it, right? So
I wish I had that button. That's sweet.
Yeah, see, this is what happens when you have control. You can just mute whoever you want, whenever you want. We'll pull Vlad off of mute here in a minute as he walks away.
Toby and I are just going to talk about Teoscar Hernandez for an hour. Then it's going to be great.
There we go. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media, and then plug everything you do in the industry.
Yeah, more than anything, thanks for having me. Thanks for putting this together. Really cool that you do this all. You can find me at RotoWire. I do the Sunday night / Monday morning, depending on what coast you're on. A podcast with Jeff Erickson. Do a football podcast there with Andrew Laird talking DFS. But every Sunday night you can hear us talking baseball, talking a lot of NFBC at the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. And then joining us as well is Jake Hallisker from Rotosaurus. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Justin. I really appreciate you having me on with this amazing crew. I know Toby wants to, self-disparage, but this is a big bunch of heavy hitters here, and everybody sees me and they go, "Who is this guy?"
He's the dude who won the overall in the auction 2 years ago, I think. Is that right?
Longest running champion.
Yeah. Usually he has that big. He usually has the big check right behind him, so we don't forget though.
I just got that hung for the occasion.
Nice.
So that is true. There was no auction championship last year, so you're still the reigning champion, right?
I can say that forever until somebody wins 2 years in a row.
Yeah. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and then plug what you do.
You can find me on Twitter at the Dust Mite, along with my partner Dave McDonald, who's a lot more vociferous than I am when it comes to Twitter. We run the High Stakes Heat podcast associated with our website Rotosaurus, which you also plugged. You can find me mostly on the podcast right now. In season, we do some closer stuff, starting pitcher things, and also other various stuff. But most of what we do is on Twitter on the pod right now.
All right. And apparently somebody's shredding something or something. I don't know what's going on there. But joining us as well is Vlad Sedler. Vlad, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Justin. It's a pleasure to be here with this panel. I apologize for the technical difficulties. My dog got loose, so we had to correct that situation.
That happens. This is why I have the outside office shed thing, so I can keep the kids away from me and the other family members as well as pets. So totally understand that. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and then plug what you do.
RotoGut on Twitter, and my work is primarily found on fantasyguru.com. So lots of preseason stuff and getting ready for the regular season. Let's do it.
Let's do that. We're going to be talking NFBC because you guys are all very, very successful NFBC players, and I aspire to be as good as you guys are. So I'm actually trying to cheat right now in case any of you are in my main event league and just picking your brain right now. So let's start with kind of like the basic beginning of NFBC leagues. That's KDS. It's Kentucky Derby style drafting or picking your draft slot. So what I'm going to do real quick, because I have been sitting here for way too many hours and really need to use the restroom, is I'm going to throw it to Toby, and then you guys just go around the horn, and I'll be right back.
Beautiful.
I'm making photocopies over here, though. I don't know if I'm able to do this. Sorry about all that noise. I thought I was on mute as I was plugging and unplugging.
This panel is very professional. It's starting out great.
For sure.
I thought they wanted us to do like he wanted us to do an actual like KDS run right now, but yeah.
Yeah. I thought we were doing actual like horse racing. I was just totally confused.
It really looks like he's like in a throne over there. Like he's got a nice setup. That's pretty sweet.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
It is. So with KDS, for me, I think it really depends on what you want to get. I think if you want, we've talked about this before, but like making sure that you're not just looking at who you're getting in the first round, right? You want to look at who you're going to get in the second round, who you're going to get in the third, the fourth, or at least put yourself in a position to be able to get those players. You can't always control that, but what you can do is try to plan ahead. Think about the strategy, think about the foundation that you're building with those first few picks. For me this year, I think it's a really interesting year because for somebody like me who really wants to get starting pitching early, I feel like you actually need to, it's just moving up and you need to be really far up in KDS, right? You really need, if you want DeGrom or Cole, for instance, I think you really need to be in the top 3 probably just to, if that's kind of what your goal is. And then the problem is if you want those top end starting pitchers and they go early, then you're kind of stuck in this middle ground, but you can still get really good hitters. I think I kind of prefer to be in the top 8 if I'm going to get a hitter. I was in a draft with Vlad last night and I got a first round hitter, Trey Turner. What's up? And then I think towards the back end, I think there's some really creative options you can have. And I really love the hitters that tend to fall in the 3rd and 4th round there. So if you're doing pocket aces like I often do, being towards the back end is also really nice. So I really just think it depends on what your strategy is, what the foundation is that you want to lay. I'll stop talking now.
All right. I'm back, so I can take control again. Vlad, what is your KDS strategy?
It varies. It varies from year to year. It's different for people that are maybe only planning like 1 or 2 drafts versus people that are doing several. Because if you're doing several, you can almost test it out. A lot of people are using the NFBC 50s or the draft champions to test out different spots, what they feel comfortable in. I know over the last few years, I have been completely all right with the back end of a 15-teamer, where usually there's always a good hitter that falls, and typically an ace, maybe if not a top 3 guy, but just somebody a really solid top tier guy. So you still have that this year, but it just doesn't feel as comfortable. And so that's what I'm kind of noticing is a lot of the sharp players in our industry, our competitors aren't like gushing over the 13, 14, 15. And a lot of that maybe has to do with the fact that somebody like Christian Yelich is, a month and a half ago was always available there at the turn and is no longer. Now he's kind of hitting in the top 10. But Toby kind of hit the real nail on the head, which is the mapping out and really getting a feel for what your roster construction base is, those first 4 or 5 rounds that you can sort of map out. One of the things I like to do, just like straight up old school on a paper and pen, I will write out just kind of like by ADP or just general range. I'll make the snake draft for those first 4 or 5 rounds and just kind of check off the guys I really like and see like where they line up. And if there are more guys that are lining up at like 6'5" as opposed to 14, 15, that will sort of be the area that I would feel more comfortable drafting in.
And now NFBC has that cool new tool on their ADP where you can actually click the draft board and it does it for you too. So like that's even like they're making it even easier on you. Jake, do you have a KDS strategy in particular? I know you're the kind of guy you said on your podcast that like just like do your fab and stuff in the middle of your softball game. So like, do you even think about KDS?
I was going to bring that up if you hadn't, so I'm glad you threw it out there organically. But I do plan my drafts quite a bit, contrary to how I purport myself on my podcast. Dave and I are big proponents of kind of the Casey Cha method that has become more prevalent these days because of Vlad's interview with him last year. The eliminating a good portion of the whole draft pool as it is. So as such, we eliminate probably 50 to 75%, depending on the year, of the first 5-6 rounds right off the bat. So yeah, we want to look at the ADP lists. We want to plan out where our draft slot is going to be in the first 6 to 8 rounds or so, and just see what we can come up with when you see how it falls according to the ADP. Obviously, any draft is not going to fall according to the ADP, especially when these guys all come together for their main events. That kind of tends to go out the window. But you want to get a good idea of what you can end up with, and we're big on roster construction too. So you really need to see what categories you're going to be able to get if you're at a certain spot in the draft, and you plan out where your pitchers are going to fit into your lineup into your draft strategy according to the ones that you like. This year is pretty crazy, but I have been seeing, as Vlad alluded to, there are not too many people that are thrilled with being at the back half, and I'm one of those. I'm liking the middle a lot this year. Pretty much all of my KDS has been the picks 5 through say 11 at the front in random orders, depending on the where the ADP lies at the time of the KDS running. But yeah, you definitely want to plan out your first few rounds and see what you think you're going to come up with.
And I'm one of those people that I like the middle too. And it's doing what Vlad had talked about in terms of using those other NFBC drafts, the NFBC 50s draft champions, to kind of try a bunch of different spots and see where I like. And I am finding myself really enjoying being in kind of like between 6 and 8, 6 and 9 right there. Scott, what is your KDS strategy?
Yeah, these guys have hit a lot of it, so I'll go really quick. But for me, KDS this year is really simple. I think you look at the first 4 rounds. After the first 4 rounds, stuff opens up so much you can't really plan anymore. So I think looking past that is pretty worthless. But I think to me, it comes down to starting pitchers and stolen bases. Where do you see those planning out? You have to get those. You have to get what you want in those first 4 rounds. You have to figure out where those steals are. Because if you go to the back end, you're like, oh, I really like Freddie Freeman, a pitcher. You look at 3-4, like suddenly you've either lost out on steals or you're reaching for someone a little bit early. So I think you really have to plan with starting pitchers and steals in mind. It's kind of the way that I'm looking this first 4 rounds of figuring out, making sure that I'm not behind the 8 ball in either of those categories through 4 rounds.
All right, so that kind of plays into your draft strategy. So for let's say someone's newer to NFBC, or they've maybe played some of the kind of the draft and holds, and they're moving on into some of the bigger money leagues. How do you build your own personal draft strategy? I know everybody here plays it a little bit differently. So Scott, why don't I start with you? Like, talk about what you want to do in a draft.
The best advice I can give to anybody kind of do that is really be flexible, be willing to know the player pool well enough that if something weird happens in the draft, and they do happen in the main events or some of those higher stakes standalone leagues, be ready to adapt, be ready to zig when other people zag. And that doesn't mean like punting saves or punting pitching totally, but if you have a guy that you're really targeting in the third round and suddenly he goes too quick before you, don't panic and freak out, especially if you're in person. People tend to panic. Just have a plan. Be ready. Know where, if you miss steals early, where you're going to go after that. If you don't get that starting pitcher in the first round, what you like in round 2 or round 3. So just really kind of planning and being ready to adapt, because in the bigger stakes drafts, weird stuff happens. People really draft their guys. Like you see these sexy big names. You're getting like a Jared Kelnick's going to go way up in the main event just because someone's going to want to be that guy that grabs him. Someone's going to be that guy that grabs Sixto Sanchez, that kind of thing. So be ready for starting pitchers to move up. Be ready for the sexy kind of shiny toys to move up, and just know the player pool well enough that you can adapt and kind of move when other people move also.
Jake, what about you? What is your draft strategies typically when you're going into one of these NFBC leagues?
Definitely want to piggyback on something Scott said there. Knowing the player pool is huge. My draft strategy really starts with me analyzing the ADP back in November, and then jumping into my first DC, my first draft champions. I've been doing more of them as the years have progressed, just because I feel like that's the best draft prep for me. I used to do mock drafts, and frankly, those are pretty much useless right now. So definitely think about jumping into some of those draft champions if you haven't. Just if $150 isn't a huge deal to you overall, then definitely get into a few of those. But Dave and I, and really our consortium mates, Tony and Marcus, we're big on building from the back, really analyzing what players we like at the back end of a draft in the post 20 rounds, and seeing just what we can get from them, and then tailoring our strategy in the early rounds to set us up for being able to take advantage of those players that we like at the end. Getting your speed early. We're big on those rare resources. So we're attacking speed. We're attacking the reliable starting pitchers in our eyes. And we're tending to avoid the guys that only give us 3 categories, or if their main focus is a power profile, we tend to push those guys down. We don't really get a lot of those guys early. So we're looking for balanced hitters. We're looking for guys that can provide us with some speed, and also those reliable starting pitchers.
Yancey's asking if you have massive hands or if this is just a weird camera trick.
I do have slightly large hands for my size. I'm not 6 foot, but I can still palm a basketball. Actually, Dave and I were talking about this the other day when we were potting. His hands are smaller than mine, and he's like 6'5".
Wow.
Oh, wow. I did not realize Dave was 6'5". I'm going to take back some of the trash talk that I have that I've thrown out there over the last few months, and kind of tamper that down a little bit.
If his hands are that small, you're fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, all right. Then, yeah. Maybe he'll tire out a little bit if we get into a scrap or something. Vlad, what is your draft strategies that you like to employ in drafts?
I mean, well, it's just who owes me, right? I mean, it's Stanton, Correa, Pivetta. I just keep drafting them every year. One year, they're just all going to hit all at the same time. No, I mean, it really varies. Like Jake said, a lot of my prep starts with the draft champions. Just for many years now, I feel that they're just more efficient than mock drafts. It gives me a good kind of handle of what my competition is doing, where ADP is setting in, where pockets of value are, where tier drop-offs are, things like that. But one of the things I like to do is create my own projections, and I use draft software. I use RotoLab, for example, and I go around and mess around with editing those projections forever. And it really helps me identify who I like, basically these market inefficiencies, players I like much more or much less than the field, because a lot of times this ADP data is just kind of set. If you really think about it, it's just set by the people that are drafting early on, and they have basically just set the board for us. And so for me, for example, there are pitchers that are starting pitchers going in the 150, 200 range, who I like a lot less than pitchers going after 250. For me, that's a huge inefficiency, at least the way I see it. So I maybe will attack pitchers in that region, go maybe get like second closers, get some more hitters, things like that, and then get the pitchers that I like that are equal to the guys from earlier on later in my draft.
What about you, Toby? I know you're the big pocket aces guy, the full house guy. This is like your brand. You don't do that every draft, right? You come in with a plan, though. What do you typically like to do?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, Scott said be flexible, and I believe you should be totally inflexible and rigid, and you should just draft 2 starting pitchers in the first 2 rounds and then just leave. Just walk out, and then you're good. No, I mean, I'm a big fan of taking starting pitching early on, obviously, but I think it again, like even with that, it's kind of like become a thing. But I think even with with that starting pitching, I think depending on where you are in like a draft, right? So like, I really like the starting pitchers up through maybe the middle of the 2nd round. And after that point, I don't know if there's that much of a difference between the guys who are going kind of back half of the 2nd round or early 3rd compared to some of the guys that are going later. So from a pitching and how you attack pitching standpoint, I think it's just a matter of knowing the players and kind of knowing where, not necessarily the tiers, but where you feel better grabbing a hitter than you do a pitcher. I mean, I like to start off with pitching, but it's not that much. And I wanted to just echo what Jake mentioned before, a couple of things that he mentioned. He said kind of drafting from the back and realizing what you like towards the back half of drafts so that you can draft the front part of your draft knowing that you have guys that you like in the back. That's something that I drafted my first 12-teamer last night with Vlad in a league. And I was like, I got all these outfielders early on. And then I was like, I had like 5 or 6 outfielders already. And I just wanted to draft every outfielder that was on the board because in 15-teamers, I like the outfielders that are going later on. And so in 12-teamers, I failed to make the psychological adjustment of like, oh, I can wait a little bit longer than I normally do even on those outfielders. So I think everything people have mentioned has been great. And there's a lot of different ways to attack it, and there's a lot of different ways to win. There's not just one.
And joining us now is Rudy Gamble. Rudy, welcome to the show.
Hey man, sorry I'm late. I'm like on pins and needles. I'm waiting to see if I can get a vaccine tonight. So I volunteered this morning, and they're like, "Thank you, and yeah, maybe you can come back in 4 hours." So
well,
I told that to 2020, and it didn't listen. It stayed.
Yeah. So, Rudy, what we're talking about right now is kind of the draft strategy you go into in some of these NFBC leagues. Before you give us your thought process on your draft strategies, remind everybody where you can reach on social media, and then plug everything that you do.
At Rudy Gamble on Twitter, Razzball for all my stuff, including the subscription for daily and weekly projections, as well as DFS stuff at razzball.com/subscriptions.
Awesome. Go ahead. Give us your draft strategies. You are a successful player in NFBC, in the industry.
Yeah.
You beat the pants off me every time we're in a league together. So I need to figure out your process a little here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, usually when I'm seeing you on this, I only see you from like the waist up. So the beat in the pants thing is okay, but you change your strategy on camera placement, and I'm going to change my strategy altogether against you. Yeah. I mean, as Toby was saying, it's kind of similar. I'm kind of planning out a draft board, looking at where I see the values across. I'm never trying to bank too much on players later in the draft. If it's a unicorn, like the unicorn is like the great average guy that's in the 18th round, the Luis Arias of 2020. Because if you're banking on a unicorn and that guy goes, then your strategy kind of falls apart. So always kind of looking for cases where I've got like 2 or 3 players, with certain skill sets, and that helps me kind of draw up a draft board. But in the end, I'm looking at what my notes are, that having multiple paths throughout a draft, being flexible in case a guy falls to me, like, in labor, I wasn't planning on Juan Soto falling the 5th. When it does, then I'm gonna move toward. I'm gonna take him and then figure out speed a little bit later. Gonna go on hold 1 sec. I've got a phone call.
All right, no worries.
Wow.
What we're doing here is raising money for Mental Health America and getting people mental health
All
help.
right, I'm getting a vaccine. I gotta go. I
Hey,
apologize.
go get that vaccine.
If you want me on something tomorrow, I will come on.
I'll figure something out for you, Rudy.
Okay, my bad, man.
What
Man, I miss talking
compelling
with you
human
guys.
interest?
Good luck.
I'm
Good luck.
sorry. Okay, but not sorry. You know.
Congrats, Rudy.
All right. Well, hey, we got Rudy for a second, right? So, and
At
he
least
gave
you
us
made it on.
He gave us his draft strategy. That's all we needed, right? So what we're doing today, we're raising money for Mental Health America. Every dollar you donate today and tomorrow goes to Mental Health America, and every dollar you donate gets you entered in the raffle for all the great prizes that we're giving away throughout the weekend. And that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to give away at least one prize, maybe even two. I can't remember what's on the schedule for this hour. Let's see. We have
You got my prize.
We have your prize, Vlad. So why don't you tell everybody what it is? Because it is super cool.
It's pretty cool, actually. It's a 1 year, all encompassing subscription to all three of our company products. So you get the full season of baseball and football for seasonal and redrafts and auction, which is Fantasy Guru, a full year VIP of Elite DFS, which is everything from like you can get into NASCAR, basketball, MMA, baseball season's coming up, and I'm going to be doing some work for that. And so a year subscription of that, and a year subscription of our betting product as well, Elite Sports Betting. So those three things, it's a value of over $1,000, and happy to give it away to someone right now.
It's absolutely amazing. I appreciate you and your company, Guru Fantasy. I mean, you guys, that's so amazing to give a prize pack away like that. It's going to Bob Osgood. So congratulations, Bob. I will connect you and Vlad, and you guys can work out how that's all going to go. And then let's see. We also have a 1 year ad-free subscription to Fangraphs from David Swan. David was on earlier, and so we appreciate him giving that away. And Matthew Williams, that is yours. So I will connect you with David and get you all set up on that. We actually have two Matthew Williams who donated, so I'll have to figure out which one is which. Hopefully it's not the one in the industry, because I'm sure the Matt Williams in the industry already has that. If it's not, if he does, I'll give it to the other Matt Williams. We'll work it out that way. So thank you, everybody, for donating. Please keep donating. Via PayPal is justinmasonfantasy@gmail.com, and via Venmo is @Justin Salinger. Let's talk about something that I didn't quite put on the notes, but I know you guys are all going to be capable of answering it. It's ADP. How useful is ADP? Vlad, you had tweeted a while back. When do you stop using ADP? I quote tweeted it with 1.1 in the draft. So I want to hear your thoughts. When is ADP useful in a draft for you?
It's more useful, at least for me, earlier on. I think for a lot of people, it could be useful throughout. But the problem is, it just needs to be used as what it is a tool. It's just a guide of the marketplace and what it's currently at. One of the important things to do if you're playing an FBC, make sure that you set it to whatever specific contest that you're playing, and within a recent set of time frame. If you're in the cut lines, people are going to be drafting there, maybe lighter on pitchers in general. So you would have a better snapshot or idea how previous cut lines have gone, as opposed to 15-team draft champions. And of course, there's a lot of volatility and movement in the market in ADP right now, especially with news coming out of players still signing, or someone getting hurt, or best shape of his life quotes. So people are moving up quickly, and the market moves quickly based on that. So we then have to decide, is it something that we're going with and we're going to pay the new price on, or something we're going to pass on? So ADP is just a market snapshot. It's imperfect, and it's to be used to find where we can find better or worse values, I guess you can say, from the market.
So Scott, we quote ADP in the industry all the time. I hear it on your podcast. I do it on my podcast. How valuable is it?
I mean, I think it's pretty valuable as long as you don't lean on it. I mean, it's valuable in a way that you are, you're studying a player, you're looking at all their stuff, and you look down, and you're like, where do they go? And like, if they go in the second round and you kind of like them, that's one thing. If they go in the 10th round, you're like, that's suddenly I develop targets through that. So I'm knowing, and just knowing where guys typically go is really important, and not like, I'm going to take a guy there, but if I like this guy, I got to go 2 rounds up and take him. So Vlad and Jake have drafted with me live in Vegas and drafts. I have 2 things. I have my rankings on a sheet with everything highlighted in bold. And then I keep an ADP sheet just to kind of make sure I'm not missing somebody. Like if I'm scratching off, it kind of keeps me focused. And if I see someone like, oh, that guy hasn't been picked, it's been 15 picks, then I take a look at that guy, like what's going on, what's wrong here, is he hurt? So did something happen? Is there news that I missed? So I think kind of keeping apprised of it that way, but I throw it away after the first 10 rounds. I don't look at it again after that. After that, I'm drafting based on who I have, based on what I need, based on who I like. I know what players I like in the back 2/3 of the draft. So I use it a decent amount to make sure I don't overextend myself in the first 10 rounds, but I'll be honest with you, that pick 150, the first break in Vegas in the NFBC, I stopped scratching that off. I just know what I'm doing at that point. I kind of throw that away, but I do use it the first 10 rounds.
All right, Jake, what do you do with ADP?
Yeah, I love a lot of what Scott said, and honestly, Vlad too. It's no surprise that we're going to have a lot of similarities here because everybody here has a lot of experience with this. But ADP is a tool; it's a reference point. I feel like as I've gotten more experienced, I've gotten a lot more comfortable not worrying about specifically in draft where guys are going. It's just kind of to get me in the frame of mind of what I need to plan for taking where. I've been more comfortable as the years have gone on being able to jump guys that I like. I feel like this year, even more so than in the past, I feel like this is the most comfortable I've been, knowing kind of just having a sense of when guys are going to go and then being able to jump them a little bit earlier to make sure that I get them. I'm honing in on guys maybe a little bit too much, but it's a tool. And as Vlad was talking about before, you have to tailor it to your specific league type. The NFBC site is really good at being able to narrow things down. Don't look at ADP from November at all. It's completely useless. If you're doing a 15-team league, don't include OC championship or OCs in your online championship draft results. It's not going to necessarily help you because pitching is going to be different in a 12-team as opposed to a 15. So make sure you're looking at at this point, there's plenty of drafts in a 2-week segment that you can look at a 2-week snapshot of all the draft champions and get 15, 16 drafts. That's plenty to build a good reference point off of. So make sure you're using it as a tool, not taking it as gospel, and looking at it as a segment or a sample that's relevant to what you're doing.
You got anything to add, Toby?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what everybody said. I mean, it's information. One thing I'd kind of add is just it's really helpful in like risk assessment as you like go through a draft, because if you do have a target, like you're going and you have 2 players that you really like and you want to take 2 of them, you'd love to have both of them on your team, but you only have 1 pick. It's really helpful to be able to look at that and try to identify, okay, like if these are pretty similar players, like what's the risk of me going for this player and potentially getting this one versus going with this one and potentially getting this one? There's also a really nice formula that Baseball HQ has developed that's in its forecaster that actually allows you to take like what's the average, what's the ADP, what's the range, and what's the number of picks. And through that, it develops a standard deviation. And so it can tell you what the percentage chance that each player is available at different points during the draft. So you can actually look at that and you can say, oh man, I was going to go with, the X player, but this player is available. I'm going to grab him, but what is the chance that this player is available in the next round? So I think using those types of tools just to inform your kind of risk assessment during the draft about which player to go to and which one's more valuable for your team is helpful.
And I think you guys bring up really, really good points. It is a tool that it can be useful, especially early on in drafts. What I don't want newer players to do is use it as gospel, as I think Jake mentioned, because you have to remember, like, this is data from every single drafter in all the leagues from whatever your settings are. So that means it weighs a first place team as much as a 15th place team. So like, don't think that you're getting ahead of the curve necessarily by drafting by ADP. You're getting just as much of the data from bad teams as you are as good teams. It's just a snapshot of what potentially or what has happened in previous drafts that you could maybe try to use as a tool in your current one.
And don't draft someone you don't like just because they slipped half a round. I've done that in the past. Just like, especially in a live draft, you're like, oh, this is going to be a value. Everybody's going to like this guy. They're going to think this is impressive. I'm taking a guy 10 picks late. Man, pick who you want. Don't take someone just because they dropped an ADP. I've done that before, and it's a bad feeling. If it doesn't work out, you just feel like an idiot too.
Yeah, and like Scott mentioned before, like if someone drops in the ADP, all of a sudden you're like, man, this guy should have, according to ADP, this guy should have gone 2 rounds ago. Make sure you check, like, Roto World or whatever, RotoWire or whatever.
There you go, RotoWire.
Yeah, whatever news agency, RotoWire. Definitely check RotoWire and make sure, like, that they're not injured. I made this mistake in my first ever main event live. I think it was Martin Maldonado. Like, I was like, oh man, he should have been gone. And I drafted him, and the guy at the end of the draft goes, Maldonado got hit by a pitch, like when we were in the 20th round, and it looks like he may have broken something. I was like, oh, great. I've already drafted an injury risk team. And
was that the only injured player you took that draft?
It was not the only injured player I took, but that's the reason why you don't take these guys, right? Because
wait, there's no IL?
Yeah. Oh man, I messed up. And that brings us to our next topic. But before we do, remind everybody, I want to remind everybody where you guys can be reached on social media, and then plug your works. That way we don't run out of time at the end of the segment. So Scott, remind everybody where you can be reached and what you do.
RotoWire, Fantasy Baseball Podcast, Fantasy Football Podcast. You want to reach me on Twitter. Now the time of year where I'll really be talking baseball. Usually I'm talking some football and golf up until now, but really a lot of baseball in March. My @ is literally just my first and last name put together without the space there. You find me there.
There you go. Toby, where can people reach you, and what do you do?
At BatFlipCrazy is the best place to reach me on Twitter. I do a podcast, and I tweet out GIFs of JT Realmuto. That's pretty much all I do.
That sounds right. Vlad, where can you be reached and talk about what you do?
RotoGut on Twitter, and work is on fantasyguru.com/MLB. Just right now, a lot of preseason specifically articles tailored specifically towards NFBC and looking at tiers by position. During the season, I do a fab article and a from the gut column, and really active with our subscribers in the chat there. And then a lot of work on our DFS site, elitefantasy.com.
And Yancey said if you had to put a price on Vlad's prize, it would be priceless. So definitely,
thank you, Yancey.
If you weren't the person who won, definitely go subscribe. It's definitely worth your money time. It's fantastic. You send me your fab article every once in a while, and I absolutely love it. Jake, where can people reach you, and what do you do?
Can hit me up at the Dust Mite on Twitter. Dave and I run the Rotosaurus account as well, at Rotosaurus. Mainly the High Stakes Heat podcast, Rotosaurus High Stakes Heat, along with Dave McDonald, my co-host. We focus very heavily on NFBC-centric strategy talk. It's not as much, specific player analysis. We don't do like full positional breakdowns or anything too massive like that. We're really honing in on the strategy talk. That's what we like to focus on.
All right. We got about 9 minutes left in this segment, so we won't be able to get to every topic I sent you guys, but I do want to talk about kind of risk assessment and risk management, because, this was my first mistake when I did my first NFBC main. I drafted a really risky team thinking, this is how you win a main event overall. I've learned my lesson the hard way. So, Jake, tell me how you manage risk within a draft.
We don't talk about risk on our show at all. I think the word risk comes up probably 10 to 15 times every episode, almost as much as please sack. We Dave and I are really we really believe that risk assessment is an underused strategy aspect in most fantasy baseball leagues. We like to cross out a lot of guys that we feel have injury risk, playing time risk, that kind of stuff. We don't take a lot of risks in the first 7 to 10 rounds. We want to really focus on making sure that we get to keep our guys on the field the whole season, if at all possible, or avoid guys that might become platooned or something like that, just because of a massive disparity there. Thanks, Yancey.
And they're all named Zach.
And if I don't get them, well, I'm just not drafting pitching. I'll have some holes in the lineup. Now, the time for you to take risks, we feel, is after like the 8th or 10th round. As long as your team is set up to a point where you can handle a couple risks, sure, take them. But if you're going into a main event with an overall component, thinking you need to hit on all the guys that are high variance, if they all pop, it's going to carry me to the top of the standings. We've seen that. We've seen people try that, and it doesn't work. Because if you're getting a bunch of guys, that have a 20% success rate, or at least 20% ability to really outlast their ADP or your acquisition costs, they're not all going to pop off in the same season. So you got to sprinkle that stuff in. Sure, when I won my overall, I definitely had a couple risks on that team. but it was they were not guys that I paid $35 for in that auction. They were the guys that I was paying $8. You know, I got 3 great months out of Joe Musgrove for $8 that year. And then he was kind of useless after that. But, you know, that was a calculated risk that I spent a little bit of money on, and I was able to then, you know, deal with the fact that I couldn't use him for the last 2 months of the season that year or whatever. So take your risks, sprinkle them in. Just don't take 5 risks in the first 10 rounds, because it's a recipe for disaster.
I'm taking notes right now. Toby, how do you manage your risk assessment?
Yeah, I think what Jake mentioned, I agree with totally. Although maybe we disagree slightly on which pitchers are injury risks and which ones are not. But I think, I think that's one of the things that I've learned is just, you know, you just have to know when to take your risks, and taking the risks on the players later on versus the ones earlier on, I think is key. And that doesn't mean that you don't go for, like, you know, a high variance profile earlier or something like that. I think there's a difference between, like, risk. There's different levels of risk. And I know that there's been conversations about defining risk and things like that. But, you know, one point of research that I thought was really interesting that came out this year is that the ATC projection system that Ariel Cohen does, they added a new metric, which is called interprojection standard deviation. It essentially looks at all the projections, and it determines which ones have the smallest variance between the different projection systems. And those are the guys at the end of the year that are actually more likely to get closer to their projection. The guys that you draft later on, they have more variance, right? But you want to draft a guy who has high variance later on, because that means that he has more of a ceiling than the other players. And if he hits his floor, then you just drop him and move off. So I think that's just one element where there's kind of some more recent research that helps inform kind of when you should take risk and how you should take it and what type of profile might be worth taking a risk on.
All right, Vlad, I know you're the one who gave me all the grief after I drafted that team. You did not hold back the punches, and you shouldn't have. You taught me a lesson, and I learned my lesson in that main event. So talk about your risk management kind of strategy.
Actually, it's funny because a lot of it came down from Scott. So when I started playing in FBC about 10 years ago, he had already been in it a couple years prior. So he had that experience. And I think there is a learning curve, like it is with anything else. It really takes a year or two to get it under your belt. Shoot, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, the risk. Yeah. The risk in terms of, it's really tough to predict injuries. You know, obviously, just because someone had been injured a couple years prior doesn't mean something's going to necessarily affect them this year, unless it's, you know, that's a different type of risk to me than somebody going into spring training with, you know, elbow issues, or, you know, Bleak or Ian Desmond broke his hand a couple years prior. Like, there are a lot of risks that you don't need to take on your team early on. And so what we were talking about that year, I think it was your first year in Maine, is those benches are already small as is. We have you know, 7 bench spots, and we have to decide, you know, we need to be able to have a roster that we can easily ensure that we don't take any zeros on our team. And that if that means having more multi-position eligibility guys, having more backups, however you stack your bench up, you can do it so long as you don't have too many of those potential zeros on your team. And who are zeros? It could be like 2 years ago, waiting on Michael Kopech to come up, and he never ended up coming up. Or, you know, it could be Wander Franco this year. You grab him, you don't know how long that'll be. So if you have a Franco and somebody that, you know, like a Mike Soroka, who we're going to wait for till May, that's already 2 zeros in April, probably for the most part on your team. And that's already sort of taking on too much risk. So for me, that's what I'm thinking in terms of risk. You want to have a full, healthy lineup as much as possible, so you have the roster flexibility to not lose out to zeros. And Scott, what was the Jermaine Dye thing? It was like the playoff game, and basically somebody lost. Was it Lindy or KJ Duke won the overall by a run? Or something?
Yeah, with the Jermaine Dye was one we did in CDM. We won a $5,000 prize on a Jermaine Dye single in a playoff game off Joe Nathan, because our batting average went up and the guy had Joe Nathan, his whip went down.
Oh. Wow. That's awful.
But I've lost leagues on a run at the last day too. So I mean, it happens both ways. But these guys have hit kind of most of what I was going to say. But 3 quick points on this. One is, I hate when people say, "Oh, it's an overall. You got to do this and this, and you take all these risks." if you play in the NFBC main event, the league prize is $7,000. Like, that's a lot of money to me. I don't know who that's not a lot of money to. Like, you have to try and win your league. Granted, if I get to mid-July and I'm like, I got good balance, I'm in the overall, sure, I'm taking a look at that. But I'm trying to win my league on day one, too. Like, that's $7,000 that I'm paying for the next 4 years. I mean, there's a lot of money involved there. Two is, if I'm taking a risk, I want that price of the risk to be already baked into the risk. Like, I want to take somebody that their drop so low that it's finally worth it if they work out. I want a risk baked in where the price is lower than it should be. And third, when it comes to prospect in an NFBC, maybe one guy that's going to start in the minors, but that's at most. Like Vlad said, you have 7 bench spots. A, you don't know when those guys are called up. B, you don't know how good those guys are going to be when they get called. There's a long list of stud 5-star prospects that come up and suck their first year, suck their first 2 months. Do not waste his bench spot on too many prospects. It's so hard for them to work out, especially pitchers. They very well work out. I always see people take prospects and they get fired up by these guys, and all of a sudden it's the 15th round. If you take a prospect, take them in a spot where if you do need to drop them, you're okay dropping. You took them in the 23rd round, you got to drop them, fine, doesn't matter. But don't take them in a spot where that drop is really going to stick.
And that's what happened to me in my first main event. Like, don't get me wrong, it was a bad strategy in general to take so many high-risk, high-reward players who are already injured. But it was when my team got hit with other injuries that I had problems. So then I just had to end up having to drop Luis Severino. I had to drop C-Mart. Like, I had to drop all these guys that I invested draft capital in. And it may not have been...
Those other injuries are coming every year, and you're going to have a couple of them. And if you have a couple and you got 2 more, suddenly you got a 3-man bench, and you're just screwed at that point.
Exactly. Hey, thank you guys so much for joining me. This was fantastic. I really, really appreciate it. Follow all these guys' work and make sure you're subscribing to their podcasts and things like that. I'm going to unceremoniously kick you all out and bring in the next crew. Thank you guys so much. There we go. Except for I do have to point out, Jake is wearing the Justin Mason Freemason shirt. That is available at
It's my favorite one.
Yeah, and I love
Justin
the robe.
gets 0 cents from it, so make sure to support him there.
Yeah, definitely support Kenny and his child's college funds. So, all right, we are raising money today and all this weekend for Mental Health America. You can see if you're watching live, the little scroll tells you where you can donate. I'm going to bring in some new guys, some new blood, some fantastic people in the industry, and Howard Bender. Howard, welcome to the show.
Am I on?
You are on. You're here.
What's going on, Justin, man? Thanks so much for having me. Thank you so much for doing Podapolooza. Always a pleasure. And you know what? I donated, and I felt great about it, and I re-gifted my my donation, my prize. So I hope somebody else out there won that baseball card and is going to be very happy with it.
I'm sure they will. The guy who gave it away said it's got like $150 market value right now on eBay. That's I don't know much about cards. You had to explain it to me. We're gonna have a panel tomorrow on baseball cards so I can learn about this because it's so hot right now. But Howard, let everybody know where you can reach on social media and then talk about everything you do in the industry.
You can find me on Twitter at RotoBuzzGuy. You can find me all over the pages at fantasyalarm.com. I do the Anti-Up podcast with me and Adam Ronis. That's on the Sawdust Podcast Network. You can find that on Spotify, iTunes, wherever. You can find me on SiriusXM, Fantasy Sports Radio, Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. I think that's it.
All right. You're one of my favorite people in the industry. I'm looking forward to drafting against you in the Barf League this year, but it won't be the same because you won't be able to elbow me every time I take a pick you like.
I know, right? I mean, listen, it's the time of all online drafts is definitely bothersome. I think once we're through everything and we can start having live drafts, I think there's going to be a lot of travel in my future and just go from city to city to draft to draft.
Yep. Joining us as well is Corbin Young. Corbin is a guy I just met in the industry, and I've really gotten to like. I got to see him draft the Worf League draft the other day and put together a really nice team there. Corbin, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and then plug everything you do.
Sure. Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at Corbin_Young21. Primarily, a lot of my writing is at Fantrax HQ, Fantasy Data, and then I do a bunch of other things with some news correspondence at Fantasy Pros and start up a fantasy baseball podcast with some folks from Fighting Chance Fantasy. So I'm all over the place.
Yeah, all over the place. Make sure you're following him on Twitter. I'm following him now, and I'm glad I am. Another one of my longtime favorite people in the industry, Doug Dennis, is joining us. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Thanks a lot. I'm glad to be here. If I knew Howard was going to be here, I would have had like a pot of coffee before I came on. That's right. I took my pen. I don't even have a pen with me. I got to get a pen.
Anybody drafting in an auction with Doug knows that he likes the player a lot when he starts clicking.
That's right. If I like a player, I signal it. It's like Jeopardy. I want the player. That's right.
Doug, remind everybody where you can reach on social media and then plug what you do.
Yeah, I'm right here. I'm over here, right there. I'm not good at this. I'm like always backwards. Yeah, that's where I am on Twitter, and I'm at Baseball HQ. Write about bullpens once a week, which I enjoyed your bullpen session you had earlier. Very good. So happy to be here.
And then also joining us as well is Dave Eddy. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going, Justin? I do appreciate you having me on the most handsome of the group. That was very well thought out.
Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and then plug your work.
Yeah, for sure. So at Corporetti on Twitter. I am writing, doing all sorts of stuff, actually. Director of Dynasty Baseball at Fantasy Six Pack. You can check that out, fantasysixpack.net. But we've got all sorts of great things going on over there. Me personally, I'm doing player profile every week, kind of like an under the radar prospect that people might want to check out. And then, of course, I do the Dynasty rankings over there. We are pushing 1,000 right now, so I'm up to, I think, 976 players that I've got ranked as of the last update. Probably going to get a little bit closer to 1,000 when I do the next one. Should be out early March.
All right, you deep league players, you know who to go to. Then that's a lot. I don't rank that many, and I write a 400-page draft guide. Yeah, I know that's way too much. That's hard. So we're going to be talking about some second-year hitters this session, and I wanted to start with a guy who's going pretty high in drafts. Was a really highly regarded top prospect. Has a little bit of scariness to his profile. So, Dave, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on Luis Robert?
I mean, I like him. I think everybody does. The swing and miss obviously is a bit of a concern, but nowadays it's really hard, to acquire stolen bases. And if you can get a guy that, is going to run a lot and has the upside for a ton of power as well, that's definitely a risk that I think you have to take. He's much more valuable, I think, in Dynasty, of course, than in redraft. For Dynasty, I've got the guy, as my 16th rated player overall. So I think that speaks pretty highly to what I think at least his long-term value is. All right.
Doug, what are your thoughts on Robert?
Yeah, I think the steals, he's actually been pushed up by the Sharps the last couple of weeks from mid-third round to right about the end of the second round. That might be a little too high for me, but I do, you got to get steals and you got to get them early, I think, in an FBC. So I like him. I don't like the batting average, and I really like to try and push batting average early in leagues because I know I'm going to be looking for some lunky power guy who hits crappy for average later. So, it makes it tough. But, I probably think where he's going right now in the Sharp leagues, I'm probably not getting him. But I do like him, and I do think that if I could steal him later in the third round, I would do it.
All right. Corbin, what are your thoughts on Robert?
Yeah, kind of the same. Last year he had the fourth highest chase rate and the third worst contact rate. That's not a good combination. That's kind of like Adalberto Mondesi kind of stuff. I think the ADP is just a bit high. It feels like you're paying for the best case scenario. But he's so young. He just debuted, so it's not like he can't improve. It's just, I think at that range, I'm just not necessarily targeting him, so I'm not landing him. But potential's there, right? The kind of 30-20 or 25-25 potential is definitely there.
Howard, are you taking that upside, or are you going to stay away from the potential downside?
I mean, it'll obviously depend on who my first 2 or 3 picks are for the draft, but Corbin's right. He's young. He's 23 years old, right? I mean, he's going to be, he's going to be learning the ropes throughout. But I mean, I think that he's in a great situation right now. I mean, from a raw skill set standpoint, 30-20, 30-25 is not beyond the realm. So, I mean, batting average, really, obviously you want the OBP to tick up. You want a little bit more patience at the plate. You want him to reduce the strikeouts, increase the contact rate, really try and leg out some ground balls. But I'm not going to throw away what he can give you for the counting stats because of the bad batting average. Now, again, I mean, he's going to obviously have to improve that walk rate. But I mean, listen, if I end up, grabbing Jacob deGrom and Freddie Freeman with my first 2 picks, knowing how everybody's grabbing stolen bases, I wouldn't be averse to taking him in the 3rd round.
Yeah, my only concern with him is just some of the underlying metrics. I mean, he led the majors last year in swinging strike rate for hitters like that. And he was 4th in O-swing last year for qualified hitters. He was like Bobby Dahlbeck area, which just, I mean, yes, the tools are off the charts, but he reminds me a lot of kind of like what was the early career Carlos Gomez, who was a borderline 1st-round pick in a lot of years, but he also disappointed people tremendously. And I don't know that I want to take that risk that early in a draft. So I have not gotten any shares of Luis Robert so far, and I likely won't moving forward. Another a guy who had a pretty decent season, but I think playing time becomes the biggest concern for Jake Cronenworth. He can play all over the place, so maybe he can rack up plate appearances that way. Howard, are you buying back in on Jake Cronenworth?
I mean, for where Cronenworth is going in drafts, as a depth player, sure, I could see it, but you're right. Playing time is going to be a huge thing. Was it Haesung Kim is brought in from Korea? We still have to wonder and see how his work is going to translate to the American game, but they are paying Kim a pretty substantial amount of money, so they're going to give him every chance in the world to succeed, which pushes Cronenworth into one of those, I don't really have a set position right now. I mean, it'd be nice if right before the season started, they turned around and they announced the universal DH was going to happen. Then all of a sudden, Cronenworth has a shot. But for right now, though, I'm probably out.
I have been saying it all day. People have been yelling at me that I'm wrong. I do believe the DH will be in the National League this year. We'll see how it works out. But I'm praying and hoping because I've been drafting like it's gonna. Corbin, what are your thoughts on Cronenworth?
Yeah, I'm trying to look at who's going around him. I'm just not usually targeting him in that range. I'm probably I'm just looking at just a playing time concern. I mean, he lights up the StatCast page last year. Late breakout guy. What is he, 27, 28 or something like that? Mm-hmm. So, I think it's just going to be more probably better real life where he's going to be the Padres kind of utility guy that'll kind of bounce around. I mean, yeah, they have Kim, they have Jerkson Profar, it's kind of it's just messy for playing time. He may rack up 500 plate appearances, but if you're doing a weekly league, I mean, and even if you look at the projections, they're not even that great. You might as well wait for a guy. You want to find the Jake Cronenworth on waivers. You don't want to draft this guy right now, I think.
Doug, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I pretty much do. I mean, I think that the value for him is all the position flexibility he gives you, but I think the playing time is a bit in question, and I think that Corbin's right on in that you really want to try and find this guy later than draft him. One of the things that I notice is the Sharps have kind of pushed him down the last few weeks from 178 to a 226 ADP. That is a big drop in just a few weeks, and that tells me that the Sharps are not on him. I'm not either.
What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, not to beat the dead horse here, but I think everyone's nailed it. The playing time now that Kim has signed is what's kind of got me completely off him. I was already a little skeptical to begin with, but just the lack of playing time is going to do it for me. And Corbin nailed it when he said this is the kind of guy you're looking to pick up off waivers, not that you're trying to draft. So I think everyone's spot on.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Like if the DH comes, I feel a little bit better, but still, they give Profar a multi-year deal. They gave Kim a multi-year deal. They have plans to play these guys, even if Kim takes a little bit to adjust. I don't see the full path to playing time, and he's an accumulator, right? He's not a guy that stands out in any particular stat category, so you need him to accumulate, and he can't do that if he's not playing every day. So he's kind of a fade for me right now. A guy that has been one of the most popular players rising off draft boards all off season is Cabrera Hayes. Some people have started to throw some cold water on him, so I'm interested to see what you guys think of him. Corbin, what are your thoughts on Cabrera Hayes?
Yeah, Cabrera Hayes is a guy that initially I was fading because he had like a 450 BABIP, but I've kind of warmed up, just kind of reading a little bit more. Diving into a little bit of the Prospect Lives team reports, and it just makes me feel like maybe he's a little bit safer. Obviously that's unsustainable, right? Like there's no way he's going to hit over 350 and but I think if I'm waiting on third base a little bit, I don't mind taking him. I kind of warmed up to him a little bit. He's just showed that he makes a ton of contact, right? He had like a 96% zone contact rate, decent Statcast metrics. I think, if he, sometimes we fade guys like on the Pirates or these like terrible teams, I really love Colin Moran. I know we're not talking about Colin Moran, but I really love Colin Moran. It's like one of those guys who are like, if it's on a terrible team, like just don't overlook that. And I think the skills are there to be a solid contributor, I think.
Yeah, one of the benefits of being on a terrible team is you're going to play every day because everybody else is terrible, right? So, and there's been a whole discussion about lineup protection. He doesn't have lineup protection. Lineup protection is one of those things that's a bit overrated, especially in the fantasy game. I'm not so worried about it. I have Hayes on 7 teams already, and I'm not shying away from him now. Doug, I heard the pen click, and I see the Pittsburgh Pirates hat. So Tell me, you're buying in, right?
Yeah, that was Howard's pen. That wasn't my pen. That was Howard's pen. But no, I am buying in. I think he the one thing I like about him at his ADP is you get some sneaky steals out of him, and he's at third base. I mean, that's something I like to see where he is. I mean, he's around guys like like Urshela and Hosmer. I think Hayes is okay there. I think he's going to play. I think he's going to play no matter what. So, I mean, that's something that you like. I mean, it's always, we were just talking about Cronenworth. We really have no idea what his playing time is going to be. I think with Hayes, we have every idea what his playing time is going to be. And, that's bankable. So I like him. I like the fact that he gives you some steals at a corner position. And what's he going? He's going. So the Sharps have pushed him down a little bit from 141 to 152. I'm comfortable at that range.
Yeah, I'm buying that all day long. All right, Mr. Pen Clicker, are you buying that?
I'm buying it if I'm waiting on the position and I'm just looking for a guy who's going to pop me 12 home runs and maybe steal me 8 to 10 bags, and maybe he'll get, 50, 60 runs scored, 50, 60. That's the thing, though, is that you look at a guy like him, great skill set. I'm a fan of his. The surrounding team is garbage. It's not even about a playing time issue or a lineup protection issue. It's okay. He's going to get on base, and that's great, and that's fine. But who's going to drive him in, or who's going to set the table for him? It's going to be fairly minimal. So, the fact that he is being pushed up draft boards means I probably won't end up with him because, again, there's a ceiling to his productivity this year, and it's just not going to get any better unless the Pirates decide that they're going to actually put something better than a dumpster fire on the field this year.
Obviously, Corbin just said Colin Moran is going to drive him in, right? So
what, his ears?
Career year for Colin Moran.
Dumbo. I'm Colin Moran.
Former first round pick, Colin Moran, and former top prospect Colin Moran. I believe you, Corbin. I'm with you. Dave, are you in on Hayes?
Well, no, I'm definitely one of the guys, that's pouring the ice on him right now. And I wish that I was as clever as Doug with his hats. And I have all these balls. However I do this, all these balls back here. I could have grabbed a ball for each of these guys. But I actually disagree about the lineup protection. I think that's actually a very underrated thing to consider. I mean, real life, obviously, but I think that directly translates to, fantasy baseball, because he's not, a veteran type hitter to where, he's got really good plate approach. And so I think that he is going to find himself, with, getting full-time at bats now, kind of forcing the issue and trying to make something happen. And that's only going to make things worse for him. So the playing time, obviously not a concern, but I really think that the biggest hit on him is that he's not going to, have guys in position, ahead of him, and he's not going to have anyone behind him to make pitchers have to pitch to him. He's really going to have to be really disciplined and, hit the offerings that these guys are going to want to throw to him.
All right. Let's move on to the next guy, and that is Alec Baum, a top prospect, former first-round pick himself. Came in, had a pretty good year to start off. So, Dave, I'll let you talk first and tell me, are you in on Alec Baum?
Yeah, now Baum, on the other hand, I'm really high on him. I think that he's a much more polished hitter. Obviously, that lineup is much better suited. He's not going to hit in the same spot in the lineup that Hayes is going to hit in Pittsburgh, but he definitely has more opportunity, and I think he's a better player anyway. So, I like the opportunity that Baum's going to get to put up probably better stats all across the board. Now, I know he's going about 50 spots higher, so you're going to have to pay a little bit for him. But I think in most, if not all leagues, he also has dual eligibility. So, being able to slide him in at first base potentially as well is something that I think can be valuable depending on your league's format as well.
All right, Doug, you changed hats. Does that mean you don't like him?
No, it's a Phillies hat. That's all.
Oh, okay. All right, there we go.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to keep with these guys. I'm trying to feel the zen. I'm channeling a little bit of Lar Michaels. I'm just trying to make sure I got my full Phillies on before I weigh in. But no, I mean, this guy's being drafted right around Rizzo. He's being drafted around Matt Chapman. He's being drafted around Chris Bryant and Josh Bell. I'm not in. I mean, I think he's great. I think he's good. I don't think he's as good as Rizzo. I don't think he's going to give me what that guy would give me or what Chapman would give me. So, no, I'm not really in. But I do like the player. It's just that his ADP is far too high.
Is ADP too high for you, Howard?
Yeah, I mean, once you start mentioning guys like Chapman in the same sentence as him, as far as similar ADP, yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, listen, I think Baum is he's a good solid talent. He'll blossom into a good solid 20-25 home run guy. He's going to hit too low in that Phillies lineup, so that's obviously something that you have to be concerned about for fantasy purposes, because what is it, for every 3 spots you're down in the lineup, you lose an at bat. So listen, I think that he is a good player, but again, if you're in a redraft league, maybe this isn't the year to grab him. Maybe you want to wait a year or two.
All right, what do you think, Corbin?
Yeah, I love the player. I think it's just the ADP is a bit high. Yeah, like Dave said earlier, just a good prospect, good hit tool, good OBP skills. He's a massive dude, so I think he'll probably develop into some power. What is he like? He's got like that linebacker status of like 6'5", 225, just like a big dude. I think I feel like we're just paying up for what we think it's going to be. But yeah, definitely, you look at the guys around there. Even Mike Moustakas, like those kind of guys that have proven it before, I think are just a little more. I feel better about taking them that early. Just the ADP is a bit high. I don't think I'm going to grab him, but if he falls a little bit, I may consider him.
All right, another guy who hit on his first go around at the majors and really has hit everywhere through the minors and seems to be falling a little bit in the ADP is Ryan Mountcastle. Doug, what are your thoughts on Mountcastle for this year?
Hold on. Yeah. I can't believe that he's so everybody's kind of mean about Hayes, but I don't really understand why Mountcastle's in the same range as him in ADP. And he is. I mean, they're right around each other. I'd probably rather have Hayes because of the steals. I think Mountcastle will play. He's going to play for sure, and he might. He might be fine. But there's guys behind him that I'd rather have. So no, I'm not really in on him. Sorry.
What are your thoughts, Dave? Are you a Mountcastle believer?
I'm probably right on par with Mountcastle. I definitely think that, his power is for real. The on-base percentage is going to lack, which is surprising, whenever you consider his batting average isn't going to be poor. So he just isn't a guy who walks, but, he's going to be on a team in a ballpark that, they're going to be trying to smack homers. And, he kind of runs in the same situation that Hayes has as far as a lack of protection. But again, I don't know if he's going to bat in a spot where it's going to necessarily affect him as much as it does Hayes. So, I mean, I'm not too high at Mountcastle, but I'm also not like the low guy in the room on him.
All right. Corbin, are you the low guy in the room on Ryan Mountcastle?
I just can't believe all these guys are going so high. Like, I'm looking at it. Like, I felt like he was like, I mean, I haven't drafted Mountcastle, but like my gut thought like he was closer to pick 200, but he's like right in the 150 range. Yeah. He kind of feels like a little bit like a better Renato Nunez, just in terms of like the production he's going to provide. So he's probably going to have a better batting average. We know what Orioles hitters are. I think, the ballpark plays up. And so I don't mind grabbing him, but I haven't grabbed him yet. I honestly thought he was closer to pick 200, but I guess I'm wrong.
He's one of those guys that kind of you forget like where he's going, because I in my head like I'm thinking, yeah, he's going pick 180, 190, and then I start getting to the point where he's actually being drafted in the ADP, and I go, there's too many guys around here that I like a little bit more than Mountcastle, and that's hard for me because I've been a big Mountcastle guy when he was coming up through the minors and was part of the free Ryan Mountcastle contingent, and I just haven't ended up with him in drafts. And like I've said all day long, I've been in a lot of drafts already, haven't ended up with him. That's saying probably need to move him down a little bit in my ranks personally. So, Howard, where are you at on Mountcastle?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan either. I mean, again, you're looking at as the power is developing for him, it'll be better, I think. While Toronto's playing their home games down in Florida, Yankee Stadium's a nice ballpark to hit in. Fenway, Camden Yards, obviously. So, I mean, that's gonna help him out, a lot. What I think the big problem is, and you guys have all pointed out the same thing. Like, you're surprised as to where these guys are going in drafts. And I think that really, the biggest problem is that we're trying to ascertain how these guys are going to perform after watching them in what could very well have been the worst MLB season of all time. It's like 60-game truncated season, no spring training. Everything got all screwy, everything got all wacky. So, we're looking at their minor league totals, and then we're like, okay, well, what'd they do in their first go around? But that first go around was a problematic thing for them as well. So you have to kind of just, rely a little bit more on, what you've seen from these guys, plate discipline wise, potential, frame, like Corbin said, when you're talking about a guy who's like Bohm, who's like built like a linebacker. So, you kind of have to take some of that stuff into more consideration, kind of weigh a little less about what they did last year, especially, when you're starting to cite plate discipline numbers and swinging strike rate. So, I mean, I think overall, we're all kind of in that same boat with Mountcastle, with some of these other guys who are like, well, yeah, we'd be interested in them if they were like 5 rounds cheaper in drafts. But for right now, we like the player. We don't like where they're being taken. And Mountcastle's no different.
And the hard part with Mountcastle is he didn't even get the 60 games, right? He only got 35 at the major league level. So it's an even smaller sample to work with than some of these other guys on this list. And it makes it a lot more difficult. What we're doing today and tomorrow is giving away raffle prizes for people who have donated for Mental Health America. Every dollar that's donated to my PayPal, justinmasonfantasy@gmail.com, or my Venmo at Justin Salinger will be donated to Mental Health America, a fantastic organization that does a lot of good in helping people get access to mental health treatment. And so far, we have raised $4,300. So I really appreciate everybody who has been donating. Please continue to donate. For every $1,000 that's raised, I'm going to add another TGFBI spot that's going to be given away at the end of the weekend. So that's already 4 spots. Last year we gave away 6 spots for raising over $6,000. So please keep donating and helping us raise money. Right now we're going to give away a prize. But before I do, Howard's giving away a fantastic prize. It's going to be given away next segment. But I do want Howard to talk about what it is, because it is really, really cool.
I think I'm giving away a lifetime subscription to Fantasy Alarm, which, I obviously retail value on that is somewhere in the $300 to $400 range, depending on what our promo code is. It's full access. Every sport, DFS, seasonal, Wager Alarm is not included. I'm sorry, but Fantasy Alarm, all that stuff that goes along with it. So that means like every draft guide, every cheat sheet, everything that goes along with Fantasy Alarm, access to podcasts and all that stuff, yours for the rest of your life.
There you go. And I mean, no other subscription being given away today has a lack of an expiration date, right? Nothing is lifetime except for the Fantasy Alarm membership. So that's going to be given away next segment. Right now, I'm going to give away some baseball cards. Aaron Pags was supposed to be on this segment. Unfortunately, life happens and he was unable to make it. But he wanted to donate some autographed baseball cards. So I'm going to do the little randomizer thing here, and we are going to end up with Howard Bender of Fantasy Alarm.
I'll tell you
what. Feels a little bit rigged.
Right. It's my second one. Why don't we throw this back in?
All right.
Let's give it to somebody who's not in the industry, and we'll go from there. Unless Dave was raffling off all those balls behind him.
Yeah.
If I can get Dave Eddy's balls, then I'll keep the prize myself. How about that?
Howard, you're going to have to get in line, buddy. A lot of people are after these balls.
All right, so the next person not in the industry, that's Matthew Wiener. Thank you so much, Matthew, for donating. I will hook you up with Aaron, and he will get you those cards. So I really, really appreciate Aaron being willing to donate something, even though he couldn't come on. So keep donating. Fantasy Alarm lifetime membership coming up next segment. But let's before we jump into the next player we're going to talk about, I want to give you guys again another chance to kind of talk about what you do in the industry and where people can reach you on social media. So Howard, remind everybody again where you can reach on social media, and then plug everything you do over at Fantasy Alarm.
All right, fantasyalarm.com, wageralarm.com, DFS Alarm, which is coming soon. We're going to have branch out all of that stuff. You can find me on Twitter at RotoBuzzGuy, and you can find me on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. Me and Jim Bowden every Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. We have a great show over there, a lot of fun. Oh, and the Anti-Up podcast with Adam Ronis and I. We just won FSWA, multi-sport podcast of the year. So how cool am I?
Yeah, I mean, Fantasy Sports Writers Association winning podcast, Anti-Up. Definitely go listen to that. Dave, please remind everybody where you can reach on social media, and then plug all your work.
Yeah, so again, at Corporal Eddie on Twitter. I'm the Dynasty, the director of Dynasty Baseball over at fantasy6pack.net. Tons of great stuff on there for Dynasty Baseball, redraft baseball as well. Got all the sports covered over there, and I do the super deep, almost 1,000 players on my Dynasty rankings.
All right. And then, Doug, remind everybody where you can reach on social media, and then plug all your work.
Yep, I can be found at DougDennis41 on Twitter, and I work for Baseball HQ, writing the bullpen column once a week. And really, that's about it, except for the first pitches, which, of course, are virtual these days. But hopefully we'll get back out to Arizona in the fall.
Yeah, I really want to get back out to Arizona. I got to go to first pitch for the first time in 2019, and it was an absolute blast. If you've never been to first pitch, you have to go. I mean, don't get me wrong, the baseball games are fun. Yes. The panels are great and informative. Yes. but it's really just getting to talk to people and pick people's brains, like in the off times, and getting to hang out with people that is so valuable. Getting to sit down with people like Ron Chandler and just shoot the shit, you know. And I mean, I learned so much from just being there. It's well worth the price of admission, and I'm there. So, like, I mean, that should be enough, you know, to pay for the price of admission right there.
Is
Corbin,
Danielle there?
She will hopefully be coming with me next time, but not guaranteed. We do have 2 small kids, so we'll see. I hope so.
It's going to up your street cred a lot more if she is. I'm just saying.
You know, maybe that's the thing. Like, if she beats me in TGFBI this year, she gets to go, and I have to stay home with the kids.
Ooh, I like that.
So, I don't know if I'll agree to that, but you know, it's definitely something that has been brought up before. Corbin, remind everybody where you can be reached and what you do.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Corbin_Young21. I do some fantasy baseball content over at Fantrax HQ, Fantasy Data, some MLB news stuff at Fantasy Pros. I also dabble in the fantasy football world, but I know that's not what this is about. And been just starting up doing the podcast with the Fighting Chance Fantasy folks with Steve Rappin and all those guys, and just trying to get some experience behind the mic. And
well, I definitely will be listening, and I already follow you on Twitter and follow your work, so everybody else should do the same. Let's do at least one more kind of second-year hitter. I'm going to skip over Sean Murphy because of the whole lung thing and just go straight to Jared Walsh. Jared Walsh came on the scene out of nowhere. I don't think people really realized like that he was going to be a contributor for the Angels last year, and he just raked. The question becomes, do we believe that he can do that again, or will he be given the opportunities, Corbin?
Well, he had a pretty dominant season in AAA in like 2019, but I guess like 36 home runs, 90 runs, 86 RBI, high batting average. But it is the PCL, I believe, where he played. So, take that with a grain of salt. I think I haven't been actively targeting him at all, just because, like you're saying, playing time. I might platoon a little bit, and just kind of came out of nowhere a little bit, and I'm not sure if I need some power. I could probably find that a little bit later with a guy that I feel more comfortable with.
All right, Doug, what are your thoughts on Jared Walsh?
No, it's the same. I mean, he had a great year last year, no question about it. But you can get better corner infielders later. I mean, lots of them. I mean, I really don't see why he's going where he's going. Other than, shiny new toy syndrome. I think he's fine, but I would not target him at his current ADP. And his ADP is falling. So, no, not 30. I just have one for every player that we were told to. Yeah.
Well, next year I'm going to have you prep for 30 players on 30 different teams just to see if we can get it done. It may just be you and me rifling through them real quick. Yeah, but I do want to see this.
I'm in, and I'll bring my pen.
There you go, Dave. What are you doing with Jared Walsh? You see a guy you're targeting?
Actually, Jared Walsh is a guy that in most of these mocks I've been doing, I always end up with. And ironically enough, he's not one of the guys back there. I've got every one of these guys back there except for him. But yeah, I'm actually a believer in him big time. I think his power is for real. I could easily see him getting, 20 plus home runs this year. I mean, he could get you 30 plus. But, kind of like a lot of these guys we're talking about, they're all young guys. So you're going to find, a struggle with all of them with the, on base percentage. So he's going to help you a lot with, slugging. The OPS will be adequate. Average is going to be lacking, but I mean, power is not going to be lacking. So he's a guy that I've been targeting. You can usually get him, in the low 200s where I've been finding him. So definitely a guy that I'm higher on than most.
All right, Howard, are you high on Jared Walsh too?
No. If there are a lot of things I'm high on, Jared Walsh, not one of them. I'm higher on Dave Eddie's balls than I am right now on Jared Walsh. Listen, I think, Corbin's right. I mean, this dude was hitting in the PCL. Every single ballpark out here in the PCL is hitter friendly. He's a late bloomer, right? He's 27 now. He'll turn 28 midway through the season. He's like Mike Yastrzemski, but with better power. I think the strikeout rate is too high. I think that he was thrust into action last year, which, just kind of helped him. But, I don't see a full season of production out of him. I'm not looking for him. Like Doug said, if you're looking for a corner infielder later on in your draft, there are plenty of other names that you can look to.
And I mean, here's my thing with Jared Walsh is he going to play full time? I mean, they have Shohei Ohtani, who's going to be DHing. The corpse of Albert Pujols, the Hall of Fame corpse of Albert Pujols, is still there for one more season. They brought in Dexter Fowler, Justin Upton. Now, obviously, injuries could work itself out. I just don't necessarily want to plan for that with, my CI spot. I think part of the reason he was a slow developer because he was a pitcher also. He was pitching and hitting in the minor leagues, and I do believe they even said that he might be eligible as a pitcher this year. I'm just not willing to pay the draft capital right now. It just hasn't ended up on any of my teams.
Yeah, I mean, and like Doug said, if you look at some of the other names that are around there, you can get the upside of Andrew Vaughn, who should be the full-time DH for Chicago. CJ Cron, you can have CJ Cron hitting in Colorado now. So, to sit there and take that risk on Jared Walsh, to me, it doesn't make sense for where he's going.
All right. We got time for, I think, one more, and that one is Bobby Dahlbeck, who, I think I kind of mentioned him earlier when we were talking about swinging strike rates and really, really high ones for hitters. So, Howard, what are your thoughts on Bobby Dahlbeck?
Well, see, this gives me my opportunity to name drop a little. I was talking to Chaim Bloom the other day, and we did. We either, Jim Bowden and I interviewed him on Friday's Fantasy Alarm Show. So if you're a subscriber to SiriusXM and you listen on the app, you can hear the whole thing. He was very happy-go-lucky when it came time to talking about Bobby Dahlbeck's power potential, and we saw, Dahlbeck with that home run binge. But then all of a sudden, everybody started making adjustments. Now, Dahlbeck was making adjustments of his own, and I do think that he's okay. But, again, you're looking at a guy who probably hit, 6th or 7th in that Boston lineup. He'll give you some decent power, but overall, I think, you're looking at way too many strikeouts, low batting average. And 25 home runs is nice, but if that's coming with a 230, 240 draining batting average, again, I'll look elsewhere.
What about you, Corbin? Are you looking elsewhere other than Bobby Dahlbeck?
I think I drafted him in that Werf league, but yeah, this is where I can take a guy like this, right? Like past pick 300 or close to pick 300. I'm more than willing to take that gamble there. I think just if he's gonna play every day and just that raw power, that's where I can take the risk on the big power guys. But just got to be quick to dump him. I mean, what he hit 5 home runs in a row or something, or 5 games in a row, the home run. So he's probably going to be a little bit streaky there. But I think it's probably just more like a guy that you're just swapping in a bench batter if you're trailing on home runs or something. You're trying to swing for the fences. So.
And in your defense, the Werf League, just like the Barf League and all the other Earths leagues, are on-base percentage leagues, and he did walk in a 10% clip last year. So, his batting average may be markedly worse than his on-base percentage. Doug, are you in on Bobby Dahlbeck?
No. I stuck with the Angels hat because I see Troy Glaus. That's what I see. I mean, without a glove, Troy Glaus without a glove. I mean, He hits home runs or he doesn't hit it at all. I think his contact rate is 61%. He's fallen like a rock in the ADPs once the Sharps got involved with the main events. He's going now about 343. I don't even think I have to pick that far down. I mean, I think I have my full complement of reserves by the time he's going. So unless I'm going in a DC league, I'm not in. No.
All right. Dave, what are your thoughts on Dahlbeck?
I mean, I think Dahlbeck is, kind of similar to a lot of these guys we're talking about, a lot of power, and, kind of going to hurt you everywhere else. But I do think that, he does, give you an opportunity to think about, guys like him and, your Jared Walshes that you can get really late in the draft that you can get a lot of power from. And to me, that just kind of reemphasizes early in the draft that I'm going to be looking for guys more like, Lou Rob, who's going to get me, the stolen bases as well as, the power. So I think if anything, to take away from something like where Dahlbeck and Wash go, just is that stolen bases are a lot more of a valuable commodity and they're harder to acquire.
All right. Yeah. And I'm kind of right there with you guys. I just can't do the Dahlbeck thing. And I mean, he's going so late. If you can make up the batting average, or have already made up the batting average already, then maybe you can do it. But that's such a risky proposition. Howard, you got something to finish on?
Well, there was one more thing, is that I also don't necessarily know if Dahlbeck's going to finish the season playing at all. Bloom seemed really, really strong about Tristan Casas, the kid they've got in the minor leagues. So, I know you also have Chavis is over there as well for Boston, but when they fall out of it, and they will fall out of it, Casas could end up being called up and given some good second half playing time just for the experience. And that could come, as early as August.
All right. And then we got a little shout out for Casas right there in the chat by Shelly V. And like I keep saying throughout this day, Shelly V is one of the best players and smartest people in the industry. So if she's shouting out Casas, that's probably a bad sign for Bobby Dahlbeck. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Justin, man. It's been an absolute
pleasure. I'm gonna kick y'all out and start bringing in the next crew here in a minute. So I appreciate you guys for coming on and sharing your knowledge and helping us raise money for Mental Health America, a fantastic organization that does a lot of good. And we're going to start bringing in this next crew here and start with my main man, Ryan Bloomfield from Baseball HQ. Ryan, why don't you remind people where you can reach on social media and then kind of plug your work? You might be on mute.
All right, how about now?
There we go. There you go, Ryan.
You would think I would have done a few of these by now, that I'd figure this stuff out. But what I was saying, and no one could hear me, was you can find me at Ryan BHQ on Twitter. I'm at Baseball HQ, write a speculator column there every Wednesday, and churning out a lot of content on Twitter with Bloomboard. So if you don't know what those are, search for those on Twitter, and I put those out, I don't know, probably a few times a week. So that's where you can find me.
Yeah, definitely one of those things you have to be following on Twitter. If you're not following Ryan Bloomfield on Twitter, you're missing out. Another guy you should be following is my buddy Steve Paulo. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. Remind everybody where you can be reached on social media and plug all your work.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Steve Paulo, just Paulo, and I tweet about a lot of baseball stuff, a lot of what I'm doing with my projection systems, Stomper and Tommy, and a lot of other stuff too. I don't promise that all of my tweets are at all related to anything you're interested in, so buyer beware.
Well, and that's what happens when you follow me. So, you may get some baseball information, you may get me in a bikini. Who knows?
Worth every penny.
Nobody wants that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of I'm like the Alberto Mondesi of Twitter. You might get some really good content, or you might, get something you weren't expecting or wanted. So joining us as well is Reese White. Reese, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Remind everybody where you can be reached on social media and talk about what you do in the industry.
All right, so you can reach me at Reese B. White. I am doing some prospect stuff for Prospects Live, and then I'm working on, at 6-man rotation, I'm working on my top 150 prospect list.
All right, and then Brian Rudd is here as well. Brian, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Justin.
Brian is a fantastic player. Someone, if he falls into one of my leagues, I'm always a little bit scared to draft near him or around him. So, Brian, remind everybody where you can be reached on social media and talk about what you do.
I'm on Twitter at RedHQ and doing writing once again at Baseball HQ, and also doing some work at Rotoballer and Sportsbook Wire.
All right. And joining us as well is Chris Towers. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
It's going fantastically. I've almost made it through day one of this, still intact somewhat. So we'll see how I fare tomorrow. But remind everybody where you can be reached on social media and plug everything that you do.
Yeah, at C Towers CBS on Twitter, and I work for CBS Fantasy. So, Fantasy Baseball Today podcast. We've got Fantasy Baseball Today in 5 that's launching on Monday. So, check that stuff out. It's good stuff, I think.
I think it is as well. And I was on a few weeks ago with Frank. You were, I think, out of town, unfortunately. But it's a great podcast. Everybody should be subscribing. If you don't know CBS, you probably haven't been playing fantasy very long.
Yeah, I guess. We're all right. We try.
We're getting a little bit of a plane action. I don't know who's
was piloting. You shouldn't be podcasting while piloting, guys.
It might have been Reese, so I just muted him real quick. So I'll unmute him later. So we're talking today about some breakouts from 2020 and whether or not we believe in. Some of these guys are really polarizing players, including the first guy on our list, because Joe Musgrove has sucked us in once again and then sometimes really broken our heart. So I'll start with you, Chris. Where are you at on Joe Musgrove? Are you buying in this year?
Yes and no. We've done this. I mean, this is 3 years in a row now where we look at like the last 4 starts of Joe Musgrove's season and say, wow, brand new Joe Musgrove, guys. He's gonna put it all together. And I hope so. I've definitely been suckered in a few times. The only issue I have, I guess, is somehow he's going even higher than ever before in drafts. I think his ADP, I'm trying to find his 2020. So yeah, at NFC last year, it was 205.92. This year, I think it's 60 spots higher around that. I don't think I'm going to draft very much Joe Musgrove because of the price, but if he was going 200th overall, I would love Joe Musgrove.
Well, the problem is he's not going 200th overall. And I do kind of feel like, and I think I tweeted this out early in draft season, like I'm Charlie Brown and Joe Musgrove is holding the football like Lucy, and like I'm running up. I'm gonna do it again. It's gonna happen this time. And then every year it feels like the football gets pulled. I'm still doing it though. I've drafted Joe Musgrove. So Ryan, tell me, am I making a mistake?
I don't think you're making a mistake. Like the weird thing with Musgrove's ADP, and yet, yes, it's up from last year. But like almost every starting pitcher ADP is up from last year as well. Like it's been talked about. It's obvious pitching's getting pushed up. So like what I find actually in the middle rounds, like where Musgrove's going, like 8th, 10th round, for me, there's not a whole lot of other starters that I actually really like in that tier. Pablo Lopez is one, Musgrove's one, maybe Corbin, if I'm banking on a rebound there. So kind of the short story is with the pitch mix changes that Musgrove had last year. I believe in some of that, despite kind of the small sample. And I mean, I'll kind of let Brian talk. Brian had his forecaster box, and we were working on that one together with him before he was traded to San Diego and before we knew about the draft price. But in that general soft middle tier, I think taking Musgrove is fine. I actually tweeted out in our labor mix draft that was like the one mistake I think. Well, not the one mistake. I probably made more. The biggest mistake that I made was not taking Musgrove in like the 10th round because, again, for me, that middle pitching tier is so soft that Musgrove's one of the few guys, even at the elevated ADP, that stands out to me. So I would take a shot on him in that kind of 8th, 10th round spot.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised he fell that far, and I don't know why Joe and I didn't pull the trigger on him as well. I kind of regretted that as well. Brian, tell me, are you buying back in on Musgrove?
Yeah, it's tough, as Chris said, but he's done this to us several times before. I love the way he finished the season once again. As I noted in the forecaster, like his last 5 starts, he had increased velocity, 39% K percentage, and 2.22 ERA. The price is pretty steep, and I like some other guys around him as well. I don't know. I think it's a pretty fair price. I'm not reaching to get him. He's not a huge bargain or anything, but I'm fine if I end up with him. I do see, he could take it to another level if things break right.
All right, Reese, are you buying back in on Musgrove, or should I be avoiding him now?
I think I'm going to be avoiding him, but there was some interesting things that I noticed in his 2020. I mean, he started to throw. Let me see. What are my notes? He was hovering around a 50% fastball guy going into 2020, and then dropped it down to 40% and started throwing the curveball more. I mean, it's obviously a small sample size, but there was, the whiff rate really went up, and also I noticed that the curveball RPM also went up, which was interesting. It went from 25.75 in 2019, according to Savant, to 2020 it went to 27.12. And I thought that was an interesting development for him. But I don't know. I think I'm just going to. I think I put in my notes. I don't know. I'm not really buying into him at this point. It's like he's this guy that everyone keeps buying into, and I'm guilty of it. 2021, I'm not doing it.
All right, Steve, are you buying into? Did the Stomper tell us we should buy into it?
Yeah, it's right on the line. I think Stomper's got him at about 159th overall, 38th starting pitcher, and I think everybody outside of DeGrom and Cole and Bieber is being overdrafted in some sense, but you have to adjust to that. I will say this interesting thing I found is that in Stomper's projections, no one past Musgrove's ADP offers as many strikeouts with a similar ERA. The next closest are Corey Kluber and Tristan McKenzie. So you don't have a ton of choices if you're trying to not let your ERA sink as you hunt for strikeout guys at that stage in the draft. If he's in the 11th, I'm probably taking him. He's usually not, but if he's there.
All right. Eric Hosmer was a guy that made some swing adjustments and had a really, big year. Obviously did a stupid thing in bunting and got hurt. But I tend to want to believe in what he did. Steve, do you?
Yeah, I do. I think Hosmer, he's obviously a super talented guy. He's not a spring chicken necessarily anymore, but I like what you get out of him. The average is never gonna hurt you. There's obviously some power there. Again, sort of a fun fact that I looked through Stomper when I'm looking at Hosmer, and there's only a single first baseman with a better average in 600 plus PA at a later ADP than Hosmer, and that's the projection for Yuli Gurriel. So again, like when you get to some of these stages, like, do you love having Hosmer as your main first baseman? Maybe not, but in the 10th round, like what else are you getting at that position?
Reese, are you buying in on Hosmer's kind of changing his profile?
I kind of am. I mean, he cut down the ground ball rate, which was a big problem that he had throughout for most of his career. And, like Steve said, there is a batting average bump that he gives you later on in the draft that most first basemen can't, because at that point, you're just drafting first baseman who hit a lot of home runs. And I kind of like him. I'd rather him as a corner infield guy, but if I have to have him as my first baseman, I guess I'm not complaining.
Shelly saying that Musgrove and Hosmer have been her fantasy kryptonite for years. She doesn't know if this panel is being very helpful to her. Brian, where are you at on Hosmer?
I'm kind of buying into him keeping those fly ball gains and a little more power, but at the same time, he's at a sub 700 OPS against lefties for the last 5 years, albeit with a little bit of bad BABIP luck a couple of those years. And they have so many other options in San Diego now. I mean, I think Myers will steal some time at first now, Profar, Nola maybe. So he averaged 670 plate appearances from 2015 to 2019. And, he's not a huge power guy, not a huge speed guy, not a great batting average guy. He's just a compiler. And I don't think he'll get near those plate appearances this year. I don't see why they would run him out there every day with those other right-handed options out there. So I'll be avoiding him this year.
Are you avoiding him, Ryan?
I mean, the thing with Hosmer, and this is kind of like a broader takeaway of something I've noticed with last year and how we evaluate last year. You look at Eric, and everyone talks about the, kind of the launch angle change, and he cut down on ground balls and that sort of thing. That's almost more to me like an exercise in just arbitrary endpoints. Eric Hosmer had similar ground ball rates. If you go to Fangraphs and pull up Eric Hosmer's page and go to his 15 game rolling ground ball rate throughout his career, he actually had similar ground ball rates in 2014, 2015, 2017, and 2018 that he had in 2020. We just didn't notice them because they were in the middle of the season, right? So you're not going to notice a switch in ground ball rate as much from June to August of 2017 as you would a short game season. So that's my thing with Hosmer. Like, I actually don't believe as much in the ground ball adjustment. I wish I could, because he is a really good hitter. He makes good contact. He hits the ball hard. But I need to see a a longer sample of Hosmer elevating than what we saw in 2020. Now, I mean, the flip side of that is like Hosmer did. I mean, he's quoted as saying he, tried to change his approach, and so that change in launch angle, that increase in launch angle, was backed up by some of his comments. But he's been that way before, and we just haven't noticed it. So I'm not really buying into the revolution of Eric Hosmer. That said, the price is pretty cheap. I think he's like the 13th or 14th first baseman off the board, or at least was a few weeks ago. So at that price, he's fine. I just wouldn't. I would not bank on 2020's launch angle revolution sticking into 2021. I want to see that play out over a longer sample.
And this is why I love Ryan Bloomfield, figuring out things that I never would have thought of. So, Chris, finish us off on Hosmer. What are your thoughts?
I agree that he's had these stretches before. I think, there's a little bit of confirmation bias because, he told us this was what he was trying to do, and it was the first time that he's ever really talked openly about needing to change his stance. He had been, or his approach. He had been someone who, for a really long time, was kind of stubbornly like, I don't need to change anything. Why would I need to change anything? Look at the contract I got. So I think that partially makes it a little more believable. But, I also think if he just goes back to, that 2014, 2015 range where he was like a 52% ground ball rate guy instead of the, 55 to 60% guy he'd been the previous 3 seasons, you're talking about a guy who pretty consistently drove in a ton of runs with a good batting average. And so even if he's not a 30 to 35 homer guy, if he hits 285, he's probably going to drive in 100 runs in that lineup. He's always been a guy who outperforms his power numbers when it comes to RBI because he is a good contact hitter and, seems to hit better with runners on base. So he's someone who, as a late source of batting average and RBI at the very least, I think he's a pretty good option, or I guess not late, but late-ish.
He's definitely not one of those first basemen that could potentially hurt you. Like if Matt Olson doesn't hit for power, you wasted a draft spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like Hosmer, if he doesn't take those, homer gains that we saw, he's definitely not going to hurt you because he's at least going to give you some counting stats and some batting average. I think the biggest question and most important question of the day, though, Yancey Eaton asking, how much do we need to donate to get Bloomy in cornrows?
So I was actually thinking about this. Like I was gonna originally say, like if Podapolooza out donates PitchCon, that could be in play. However, there's actually like a chance that could happen. So I'm not gonna.
Oh, I was about to say we're like almost halfway there.
It's one of those like 3 million retweets. I'll do it, but
oh, okay. Well, I don't know that I've got.
I already looked ridiculous enough.
All right, the next guy that we're talking about is a guy that him and I have a blood feud. Dansby Swanson and I have gone back and forth. I've said some bad things about him. I'm sure he said some bad things about me, though we don't know because he doesn't tweet about me. But Chris, what are your thoughts on Dansby Swanson? Can he repeat the gains we saw last year?
Yeah, I mean, it's one situation where it wasn't necessarily just last season. I think you should be very skeptical about the 2020 breakouts, and I might be more so than most people, but in Dansby Swanson's case, before he had that heel injury in 2019, he was having, kind of a pre-breakout. He was only hitting 265, but he was on pace for 100 plus runs, 90 plus RBI, 28 homers, 12 stolen bases. That's not that far off from what his pace was in 2020. And so you look at it and think, well, the only time over the last 2 seasons where he hasn't really hit at that level was a month and a half when he was coming back from an injury. That kind of tells me that the breakout is at least a little bit for real. I'm not expecting him to be a star. He's like 12 or 13 at shortstop for me, but it's either him or Carlos Correa as the last shortstop. Like shortstop is incredibly deep with superstars. And then there's a huge fall off, I think, right at Dansby Swanson or Carlos Correa. And so I want one of those if I'm not getting one of the high end shortstops. So Dansby Swanson. Yeah, I think I am buying it.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's, as much as I've hated him in the past, like, I can forgive and forget. I mean, I worry a little bit about his ability to stay on the field. We did see him do it last year, but again, short sample. Maybe, he's a guy that plays really hard in the field and can get banged up. But I do think he's turned into a better player than he was earlier in his career, when I was really, really down on him. People just tend to associate me with him.
There is also just a lot of volume in that offense. You look up and down the Braves lineup, and the number of plate appearances that they've had over the last couple of seasons is kind of bonkers. I think, some of it comes down to, is he going to keep hitting second like he was, in the second half of last season after Albies injury? I think that plays a big part, because that could be, you could be pushing 700 plate appearances in that role if he plays a full season.
Ryan, what are your thoughts on Swanson? Do you think he can hold down that number 2 spot?
I don't think if Albies is healthy, I think Albies will be up there at second for most of the year. But that's the issue with trying to project lineups, right? I mean, injuries are going to happen, so maybe one to Swanson because it's happened frequently in the past. That said, I mean, in general, yes, I'm fine with Dansby Swanson at that 180p. Chris made a great point. Like, it kind of drops off a ledge, and I would take Swanson over Correa if that's your last kind of option at short before you kind of ditch the position. That said, with Swanson, I would not expect him to hit 275 again. I mean, he kind of changed his approach a little bit in 2020. More strikeouts, but hit for a little bit more power. Enough so that in the forecaster, we tagged an upside of 30 home runs for Swanson for 2021. So I think he's a great power speed guy. I would not expect, I think the batting average is going to drop down to, back to where it's been, 250, 260. But you combine that with 10, 15 steals and mid-20s home runs, that's going to profit at his current price. And at 27 with the prospect pedigree in that lineup, like, I think he's a fairly safe investment there. So I'm fine if you wait on shortstop a little bit and you want to take one before it completely drops. Definitely Swanson's a good target to take there when you're comparing him with like a Correa.
Brian, is Swanson a target for you?
Yes, I do like him. 90th percentile sprint speed. He was 5 for 5 on the bases last year, and I think he's got the 25 homer power potential. And where he bats in the order is going to drive some of that value. And he hit 7th or lower like 7 of the last 9 games last year once everybody was healthy, which is a little concerning. But I mean, I don't think it's and I've seen him slotted at 6. It's hard this time of year to project lineups. So I've seen on RotoChamp and Roster Resource, they have him projected as 6th, but it's not hard to see him pushing his way up the lineup a little bit, and I like the skills a lot. I like him where he's going right now.
Steve, where does Stomper have him? Where do you have Dansby Swanson this year?
Yeah, I think that the comparisons to Correa are appropriate. I think Swanson is essentially Correa with a slightly better average, Correa is a Swanson with slightly better average, but Swanson's got a few steals he's going to get you that Correa's not. I think if I don't have one of the top 5 shortstops, those are the 2 guys I'm looking at later on, closer to like the 9th to 10th round, depending on how quickly they go. I do think that he's being overdrafted, but I think a lot of people are being overdrafted. That's just a silly thing to say when if that's what the market is bearing, then that's what it is. So yeah, I think 250, 80 runs, 70 RBI, 20 homers and 10 steals. Like, are you really gonna be that upset if that's your shortstop? I don't think you should be that upset. So if I don't have Tatis through Lindor, then I'm probably going to look at Swanson in that area.
Steve, right. I like your approach. Just don't draft anybody. They're all
everybody's being over. It's crazy, man. I don't get it. You should check out all the red marks on Stomper's page saying don't draft this guy. It's like you'd never have a team. Maybe I should fix that. I don't know.
Reese, what are your thoughts on Dansby Swanson?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that's been said. He's like the last shortstop that I really want. I probably prefer Correa over him because I think Correa still has that little bit more potential if he ever stays healthy, but we'll see if he does that. And yeah, I think that's really about where I'm at Swanson, honestly.
Yeah, clearly I feel different about the next tier of shortstops. I'll take, Correa and Marcus Simeon over him, and I'm actually totally fine with going with a guy like Andres Jimenez as my shortstop, or even waiting quite a while and getting just like a Willie Adames to me. I'm probably going to do that more often and end up with Swanson, but that may be biased because, like I said, we have had a blood feud over the years. And that sometimes is too much for even someone like me to get past.
That's right. You cannot draft Swanson, Justin. It's in Constitution.
What I should do in the main event or in TGFBI is take him like 3 rounds out of his ADP and just really just throw everybody for a loop. The next guy we're going to talk about, Dylan Bundy, another guy that I have not been on board with for a number of years. And I missed out last year because he was really good, but I am concerned about some things. Reese, I'll throw this one back to you. Are you buying back in on Dylan Bundy?
I kind of am, and it's weird because he's an Angels pitcher, and Angels don't exactly have a great track record with keeping their arms healthy. It's not been great. He's another one who bumped down his fastball percentage. He was another 50% guy. Decided to sprinkle that around to his other offerings, and it really helped him out get a little bit more strikeouts. And I'm in on Bundy as like an SP2 type.
What about you, Brian? Are you in on Bundy this year?
He's a guy I really want to see what he looks like this spring. The velo is down the last 2 starts, and he got roughed up pretty bad. I know it's a small sample, but the 9 good starts before that is a pretty small sample too. So I don't know. I did get him once a little later than, like pick 119 or something. But I don't know. I need to see how he's looking in spring before I invest anymore. I probably wouldn't take him at his current price if drafting right now.
He almost dropped to me in that labor draft that Ryan and I were in together. And Paul had frozen out literally because he lost his power. And so it was me and Joe going back and forth. Joe wanted him. I didn't. And then we let the imaginary voice of Paul be the deciding vote. And we were going to take him, and he went right before we picked. And so I was bailed out of that. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Dylan Bundy?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to buy the changes that he made and that Reese mentioned before. Like, yeah, fading the fastball. It's a really bad fastball. Like, it got pounded in Baltimore. But you factor in that change of pitch mix. The more sliders, more changeups, which is a welcome change with the new team, new approach, that sort of thing. So that part I buy in on. I'm not buying a repeat like 3.30 ERA, 104 WHIP. I don't think that's happening again. I'd go more like 3.75 with like a 120. WHIP, and at Bundy's ADP of just over 100, just outside the top 100. I think he's pretty fully priced. So at the price, I'm staying out. That said, he could be in my opinion, with that fastball that gets pounded in home runs, like with the dead end ball, he could be a guy if that makes his fastball at least passable. If he's not prone to as many home runs off the heater, that's going to help him a lot. So keep an eye on that. But yeah, I think he's fully priced, and I'm kind of staying off from where he's going. I thought about him in labor as well, but went with Spore's ghost opinion.
Chris, are you buying in on Dylan Bundy this year? This has been an industry favorite for a long time. Finally had the breakout. I'm not sold yet. Convince me.
Oh, I'm not the right guy to try to convince you. It's Dylan Bundy. Like, I've had such I know that's not fair, and you want to take the name away from the player and just look at the results, but it's such a small sample size of him pitching at this, new level. And really, if you look at last season, it's sort of pointless to try to X games he was this player, Y games he was this player, because he made 11 starts, and that's not enough, frankly, to analyze anyway. But he had the 4 amazing starts where he had 35 strikeouts in his first 4 starts. After that, he kind of just looked like Dylan Bundy again. 4.62 ERA over his last 7 starts. The strikeout rate was back down to the 23.5% rate. 12% swinging strike rate. It all just kind of looked Dylan Bundy-esque after this amazing start, which makes me think that hitters already adjusted to the adjustments that he made, and the margin for error for a guy who gets hit as hard as he does is really, really small. I don't know. Like, he gave up a lot of home runs back before the juiced ball when he was throwing, 92 to 95. Now he's throwing like 89 to 91. So I just, like, 18 home runs in 109 innings in 2016, 26 in 169 innings in 2017. I don't know how much the juiced ball helps him, or the de-juiced ball helps him. I guess it makes him not the worst home run pitcher in baseball like he was, but I'm pretty skeptical.
Yeah, I am as well. And then you throw on the top of it that he has a long history of getting injured. It's one of the reasons it took him a while to get to the major league level and stick there. And then the reduced velocity in those last two starts screams maybe there could be something wrong with his arm. I'm not doing it again unless I'm forced to by a partner in a draft. So, Steve, are you? I mean, you keep saying everybody's being overdrafted. Is Dylan Bundy being overdrafted?
I gotta be honest. The guys you picked for this segment, literally every one of them. There are other players that I don't think are being overdrafted. This group of 9, for whatever reason, all of them. Bundy among the worst. Can I have him as my SP6? If I can get him for my 6th starting pitcher, I might want him. But I'm projecting a ERA over 5 and a WHIP close to 1.5. Like, I just don't. Stomper does not believe that Bundy is a new Bundy, and he has him about 65th starting pitcher, $5 at auction. If you can get that, great. But you can't get that. So. No,
yeah, you're not getting that. That means you're completely out, and I'm
not gonna have any shares.
I'm not projecting him for that, but I'm definitely got him way below the market value right now. So I'm with you on that respect. What we're doing today, we're raising money for Mental Health America. A lot of you guys have come and women have come together to support this. I really, really appreciate it. So far, we have raised $4,300 or over $4,300 for Mental Health America, almost to that mark where we could try to convince Ryan to put those cornrows in.
I'll shave my head if you beat Pitcher List.
Yeah, I'll do that as well. So I won't shave my beard, but I'd shave my head. That one's easy. So you can continue to donate, and we're doing this tomorrow. So just because it ends today doesn't mean we're not going to be back tomorrow raising more money. The goal is to beat last year's mark, which was about a little over $6,000, and we're over halfway there. The icing on the cake would be to beat PitchCon, and they raised $10,300. I don't know if we're going to make that. They had 5 days, we have 2, but we're going to try our damnedest, and we're going to give away a prize, because what you get from donating money is every dollar you donate to either justinmasonfantasy@gmail.com via PayPal or at Justin Salinger on Venmo is you get a raffle ticket for every dollar you donate. And last session, we had Howard Bender on. He talked about the lifetime subscription to Fantasy Alarm that he's given away. So I'm going to go over to my little randomizer, and I'm going to do that real quick. And the person who wins is Dave Poping. So, Dave, I will forward your information over to Howard Bender at Fantasy Alarm. Really appreciate him donating that. It's a fantastic prize because it's lifetime. You get to have that Fantasy Alarm membership forever, and they're an organization that I have strong ties to. I've worked for them in the past, and I love Howard and all the guys and gals over there at Fantasy Alarm. So, before we jump into the next guy, I want to give everybody on the panel a chance to, again, plug their work, remind people where they're at on social media, so that way we don't run out of time. Though there isn't a panel after this one, so technically there is no running out of time. I can just keep going, though I doubt these guys want to stay with me all night long, and my wife would absolutely kill me. So, Chris, remind people where you can reach on social media and plug all your work.
Yeah, I tweet too much at C-Tower CBS, often about Star Wars, occasionally about fantasy sports and music. By the way, someone was asking about the cat. That was David Bowie. She sleeps all day until I'm doing podcast or video, and then she tries to bite me and rub her face against my microphone and all that. So that was David Bowie. And CBSSports.com. We'll have our fantasy baseball draft prep guide available on Monday. I spent most of last week putting that together, and I think it's gonna be really cool. It's a 40-page downloadable, printable PDF that should help you with your draft. So there you go.
All right. And then in the chat here, we've got Brockness Monster, who was on earlier. He said he'll shave his head if we beat PitchCon and the guys that we love over at Pitcher List. And he's actually got hair on his head. So that actually means something. And if you remember him, he long hair, big beard. That is putting your money or everybody else's money where his mouth is, I guess. So appreciate that. Let's get Brock to do that. Ryan, remind people where you can be reached on social media and plug everything you do.
Yeah, Ryan BHQ for social media. Search Bloomboards, and that's where you'll find me. So right at Baseball HQ, we're doing First Pitch Florida online next week. Wish we could do the real thing. I'm repping my Arizona shirt here, but hopefully this fall we'll see a lot of you all out there in Phoenix.
Yeah, and I've said it a few times already today that First Pitch Arizona was just so much fun. I got to go to my first one in 2019. It was an absolute blast. Well worth the admission fee, especially because I'll be there. And everybody wants to hang out with me, right?
Probably just Mason's appearance.
Yeah. There's way more cool, better, cool people, smarter people in the industry that are going to show up there that you can talk to, including Ryan, who is not there when I went, but hopefully will be there next time. So, Brian, remind people where you can be reached on social media and then plug your work.
I'm at Red HQ on Twitter. I'm also at Baseball HQ with Ryan, and I'll also writing for Rotoballer and Sportsbook Wire. So look for me there.
Definitely. And Reese, remind people where you can be reached and what you do.
All right, so I usually write about prospects. You can find me some of my reports at Prospects Live, and then you can also, when I do decide to drop it, the top 150 prospects at 6-man rotation.
Awesome. And the Stomper, tell people all about how many people they shouldn't draft and where they can get that information and where they could reach you on Twitter.
That's right. On Twitter, I'm Steve Paulo at Steve Paulo, Paulo, and my projection systems are at stomperprojections.com for player projections and tomyprojections.com for team level, good for your gambling needs projections.
There you go. All right. Let's finish off some of these. I don't know that we'll get through all of them, but Corbin Burns is one of those guys that people were drafting super late coming into 2020, had the breakout. He's moved way up the draft board. So, Steve, is this another guy that is overvalued?
So this is one where I disagree with my own projection system. I like Burns better than Stomper does, and we are not one brain. Like the system treats every single player the same, treats data just like numbers. But I look at the players sometimes and disagree. And I like Burns a lot. I'll be drafting Burns. Stomper doesn't so much. 4.4 ERA projected, but a lot of strikeouts in about 130 innings to be expected. If he gets more than that, though, could be even bigger. Not hoping for that. So, but I'm going to be grabbing Burns a few places, but the projection system doesn't quite agree with me yet. I think it's maybe a little slow on the uptake when it comes to players like that who are ready to break out.
Brian, is Corbin Burns someone that we can trust as like a fantasy ace?
Yeah.
Rudd, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's tough, but after one bad year, even though when he had the down year, the skills were still much better than the surface stats. And then last year was just he revamped the repertoire and he was just dominant. It was pretty wild that he barely threw the slider, and that's like his best swing and miss pitch. But he's only going to get to 160 innings if you take the Brewers for what they're saying, adding 100 innings per pitcher. But I think the skills are worth buying into, and if I need a pitcher mid, late fourth and 15 teamer, I think he's worth it. I think you can trust him.
Ryan, do you trust him?
Yeah, Corbin Burns is just fast. He's like one of the more fascinating players of 2021 for me because he's so polarizing in this industry. There are a lot of really smart people who are all over Corbin Burns. There are a lot of really smart people who are completely fading Corbin Burns, and there's good reasons on each side, right? You look at the skills last year, that's backed up with the change in pitch mix, the cutter. Like last year was legit. If you're fading Corbin Burns, the biggest argument that I have heard is the innings, right? So Corbin Burns hasn't thrown more than 120 innings since 2017. So to Brian's point, the thing is, like, if you're expecting 140, 150 innings this year, that might not be that far off from where kind of the upper 10th percentile of starting pitchers are from a volume standpoint. And so for that reason, I'm more likely to take Burns than I'm not, just because if he does throw 150 innings, like that may only be a few starts below like where most other starters are. So that's almost going to be a full season in 2021 with the talk of all these 6-man rotations and workload management and that sort of thing. So I am on Burns, but just a fascinating pitcher for me with so many people completely on him or completely off of him. It's been fun to watch the chatter on Twitter whenever you type Corbin Burns.
And you're right. It's like every time I see a Corbin Burns tweet, some smart person says I'm all in. Some smart person says there's no way I'm drafting him at the price. And then there's me, the dumb person, like, I'm in, baby. I can't wait. Like, especially if I'm grabbing him as my SP2, like I feel really, really, or if I'm waiting and I'm loading up on offense first and grabbing as my SP1 in the 5th round, like I'm totally here for it. Chris, am I wrong?
I don't think you are, but I'm not sure if I'm one of the smart people or one of the dumb people. I would rather have Corbin Burns than Tyler Glasnow, who's going around earlier in ADP. You mentioned the innings, Ryan. That's true. He hasn't thrown more than 115. I think it's 116.2 innings since 2017. But he's been healthy for the most part. I know last season it ended with the oblique strain, but that was a left oblique. It wasn't his throwing arm. He did have shoulder irritation in 2019, but he missed 8 days, basically. He went on his rehab assignment 8 days after going on the IL. So as far as a guy who throws 97 miles per hour, that's a relatively clean track record of health. Whereas Tyler Glasnow, he had that forearm strain that he missed 4 months with in 2018. He has a 4.63 ERA in 23 starts since that injury. So I think Corbin Burns, there's ways it can go wrong. We saw how wrong it can go in 2019 when he was mostly pitching out of the bullpen. But the revamped, pitch mix, changing the 4-seamer, which just got absolutely destroyed. 672 X slug, 8823 slugging percentage in 2019. Started throwing his sinker, started throwing a cutter instead of the slider, or kind of alongside the slider, I guess. And I think it's made everything play up. So yeah, I think Corbin Burns, he probably won't throw more than 160 innings, but I think they'll be very, very good innings.
All right, Reese, finish this out on Corbin Burns. You buying or you not buying?
I'm buying. I like the changes that he's made. I also kind of have a personal relationship with him because I interviewed him back in the day. So I can't really say very many bad things about him. But I do enjoy. I like the strikeouts you're going to get. I do like the point of comparing him to Tyler Glasnow. I think that's actually a really good idea. And I mean, if you want Tyler Glasnow, you can just wait around and pick up Corbin Burns. I really like that point that Chris made. So I'm buying in on Corbin Burns.
My wife has unexpectedly joined us in the StreamYard and for Podapolooza. Did you have something you wanted to say, or were you just here to show your face?
Just to show my face.
Okay, cool. All right.
Did you learn anything today, Danielle?
I learned a lot. I actually took notes, and I'm going to go back and listen again to all the segments so I can catch whatever I didn't write down while the kids were screaming.
Well, great. You guys have all given her really great information today, and apparently she's going to use that against me in TGFBI.
Good.
Perfect.
Which is
Pretty
exactly,
sure that's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, which is exactly what she should be doing and what I want her to do, right? So I'm glad this was a benefit to her. Hopefully it was a benefit to everybody involved. Let's do one quick player before we wrap up. And I'm going to go over to Trent Grisham. Was great in his first year in San Diego, was kind of a sleeper candidate for a lot of people coming into 2020. The question is, loaded San Diego lineup, is he going to hit at the top? Can he repeat? Can he improve? Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of out on Trent Grisham. Power speed guys are extremely valuable, and you look at the projections and he's only projected for like 8 to 10 steals from most of them. I think that's underselling it because the Brewers, the last couple of seasons that he was in their system, they just didn't let him run much. Clearly, the Padres approached the game differently. They gave him 11 stolen base attempts in 59 games. The questions for me are just mostly, is he actually, all that good? High infield fly ball rate, high strikeout rate. That just concerns me because he's always going to be a low batting average guy. But if he's more like a 15 to 17 homer guy instead of the, last year he paced out to 25, I think this is a case where it's kind of, you look at the pace and he looks like a 25 guy. And I think he's probably more like a 20 homer, 20 steal ceiling guy with a low batting average. And that's valuable. I'm just not sure it's not something you can't get from Byron Buxton, who I think is being pretty undervalued. And so, given the concerns I have about how good he actually is as a hitter, 2019 happened as well. And I think it's kind of, his sample size for 2019 is 8 games smaller than the 2020 sample size. And the minor league track record is good, but not great. So I throw it all together and I just think for a 5th round ADP, which is where he's going right now, 62nd overall, I just can't really justify making that investment. There are other guys I like in that range more.
Steve, you were nodding your head right there. So do you agree?
I think I like Grisham. Stomper likes Grisham. Not quite, say it with me again, at his price because he's being overdrafted. I think that Buxton was what I really nodded my head at because I am projecting Grisham to 23 homers and 14 stolen bases, which is pretty aggressive compared to some of his projections. But I'm also projecting Byron Buxton to that or better and Will Myers to that or better. And they're both available later, significantly later than Trent Grisham. So it's a question not of like whether or not I like Grisham. I think he's worth about $16 at auction, 81st overall, 22nd outfielder. That's great. Problem is he's going higher than that. And there is that production, that speed power combo in a couple places late. The thing is though, that power speed, 23 homers, 14 stolen bases, I have only 11 players total projected for that combination or better. And obviously the vast majority of them are first, second, third round type players. So, there are reasons to draft Grisham, but if you can get your hands on Buxton as an example, I do think that's a better value.
Reese, do you think you'll be drafting much Trent Grisham this year?
No, I don't think so. I like guys that are actually a little bit behind him. I like Michael Conforto more, and I like the idea of, drafting Michael Conforto and then grabbing Buxton later to get the speed. The batting average just scares me. And if the home run problem, he's not a big home run asset. So it's kind of like I'm drafting him for mostly speed to contribute at that point. And it's not something I really want to do with that high of a draft pick.
What about you, Brian? Are you buying in on the Trent Grisham hype train?
No, I'd like to disagree with the panel and make things interesting, but he's the easiest fade in the first 10 rounds for me. So there's a few outfielders going a couple of rounds later, including Buxton, that I would take straight up over him. And I don't know that he can hit lefties yet, even with the 370 BABIP against him so far in his career, which is small sample. He's just hit 250 with the 737 OPS, decent numbers. But, like I said earlier, they just have so much depth there in San Diego. And when he does play against lefties, I don't think he'll be hitting near the top of the lineup, and he may not play all the time against them. So I will not be getting Grisham in any drafts.
All right, Ryan, finish us out on Grisham.
Yeah, it sucks when we all agree. However, last week I wrote a column for HQ called Avoiding This Year's Ketel Marte, and Trent Grisham was high on that list. So I can't even make the argument to take him. So he's a fade for me.
Oh, man. This is a hard one for me. I was actually drafting him early on in draft season. The more and more I dug into it, I agree with you guys. I kind of wish I hadn't drafted him early on. And I just think the 5th round price tag is just way too high for him, especially with how they've loaded up that lineup in San Diego. He could easily find himself not batting at the top, in terms of, platoon. So, yeah, I think he's a fade for me as well. Unfortunately, no one going to bat for Trent Grisham. I'm sure his mom is watching and she will tweet at us and go to bat for him. And so we can find that on Twitter. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. this has been a really fun day, and it was a great panel to end on for today.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. This is great.
Thanks, Justin. Time to give Danielle a break from the kids.
Yeah, I think that is what is about to happen. Before I do, I'm gonna flash on the screen. We have raised $4,410.20 so far for Mental Health America. I appreciate everybody who has donated today. Continue to donate through the night, donate tomorrow. We're going to be starting this up again at 10 a.m. Eastern time and running for those 9 hours that my wife has to deal with the screaming kids by herself. But it's all going to go for a good cause, one that me and my wife feel very, very strongly about, helping people out, especially in this time of pandemic days where people are struggling, to a much larger extent than maybe they have in the past with mental health. It's really, really just a great organization to support. You can donate on PayPal or via PayPal, justinmasonfantasy@gmail.com, or on Venmo at Justin Salinger. And like I said, every dollar raised is going to go to Mental Health America, and you'll be entered to win amazing prizes throughout the weekend. Tomorrow, we're giving away things like Pitcherless hoodie, more Fangraphs memberships, Roto Fanatic t-shirts, Amazon gift card, some tumblers from Rotosaurus, some of those best ball sheets I talked about earlier that Derek Rhodes does, some copies of the Fantasy Black Book, some other subscriptions to great sites like FTN. I'm going to donate some Friends of Fantasy Benefits draft guides. And then, of course, the TGFBI spots. We've already got 4 that I'm going to give away tomorrow at the end of it. And there's going to be more prizes. I didn't even name them all. I don't have enough time because this is ending right now. I appreciate everybody for watching, everybody for donating, and everybody for being a part of it. Thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow.